So good morning, everybody, also from my side, and thank you for the invitation. We see this workshop as an important step in the work of ENTSO-E actually to expand the CBA methodology into other fields like resilience. As it was mentioned by Andrei before, the CBA 4, the fourth edition of the CBA is already prepared by ENTSO-E, on which ACER provided an opinion. So one of the main recommendations in the opinion to ENTSO-E is to actually incorporate resilience in this new version of the CBA. Therefore, we already have a cooperation with ENTSO-E on how to do so. So I hope that my presentation and our presentation, actually our proposals, will be helpful to ENTSO-E and also set the right questions on how to achieve this target further. So I hope that it is quite pragmatic and focused on this aspect.
I think that your presentation is not shared on Teams.
Oh, I thought it was already, sorry. But
here, yes, if you could, I think you still haven't shared it. So,
now it's shared. Okay. Maybe I hadn't pressed the button. So it's now okay.
Yeah, I think you just need to
yeah.
The full screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I have to. Sorry. Okay. It's fine now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good. So, as it was mentioned already by other speakers, the climate change is here. We see every day the manifestations. Actually, we see an increase of the frequency and the severity of extreme weather events, like prolonged heat waves, cold spells, extreme rainfalls or snowfalls causing floods and avalanches. So the issue is how we incorporate these conditions in the energy system. In our view, the impact on the energy system is twofold. On one hand, there is an impact on the system characteristics. So when an extreme event happens, we may see a change in the demand or also in the generation due to the difference in the availability of power plants. As a second impact is the impact on network assets in the form of reduced performance, or even worse, in the form of failure of an asset or many assets. So we will try to refer to these two impacts. The focus of this presentation is extreme events, and so events with a low probability of occurrence, but with a high impact on the security of supply, because they may lead to long interruptions and also on wide geographical areas, having an impact on both the transmission and distribution networks. Needless to say that the persistent climate change phenomena, like, for example, the rise of the average temperature, should be included anyway in the scenarios that are taken into consideration. So this is not within the scope of this presentation. So we will focus on the extreme events. Having a closer look at these two impacts, the impact on the system characteristics theoretically could be taken into account by simulating these extreme events into new scenarios. However, this impact, like impact on demand or the change in the generation, available generation, is mainly an inadequacy issue, and experience has shown that it does not have a significant impact on the networks for the time of period that these events take place. Also, we know that ENTSO-E has limited resources, so building new scenarios would be quite copious and require more resources, so that it would not be very practical. That's why we mainly focus on the second impact, which is the reduced performance or the failure of assets. And this is going to be further analyzed in the following slides. So in order to take into consideration this effect, we tried to put down the necessary steps, and we identified 3 steps. The first one is to identify which are the critical events and which is the affected equipment of the network, of the grid. Then to assess the impact of a new project to system resilience. And in our view, this can happen in terms of reduction of expected energy non-supplied by the new project or a project that improves the system. And in order to monetize the benefit that is the result of this, is to use a value of lost load. So evaluating which is the right value is the third step and the third topic to be addressed. Taking a closer look now to each of these steps, let's see the first step. So identifying the critical events is the first issue. We have to see which are the critical events and what is the geographical area that these events have an impact on. In our view, this is a task that requires appropriate knowledge, and this should not be a task of the TSOs or ENTSO-E. We think that weather and climate change research institutions should be more appropriate to tell everybody what are the expected extreme events that we are to face in the coming 25 years. The second topic is what are the consequences of these events on the system. So in terms of performance of assets and outage of the assets. This touches upon the experience and the expertise of the TSOs. So in this case, the TSOs should do this task. Maybe this is something to be discussed with some coordination by ENTSO-E on the methodology and how to do so that there is coordination alongside Europe. So after receiving input from these weather organizations, TSOs should determine the impact of these events on the system and the impact area. And needless to say here as a note that the same critical events should be used not only for the electricity system, but also for the hydrogen system, so by ENTSO-G, so that we have consistency along all the systems. The second topic is how to assess the impact of the projects to system resilience. As I already said, we think that the most appropriate indicator is the energy non-served. So as typically done by ENTSO-E on the assessment of other indicators, a pinned approach is proposed. So ENTSO-E or the TSOs can run the assessment of the grid, calculate the energy non-served, and then calculate the energy non-served with the project, having considered these extreme events, and calculate this delta. Questions arising here. So what is the granularity of the grid to be used? Is it going to be the whole network, or we can use a reduced and more simplified network? what is the scope of the exercise? So which projects shall be assessed? It's an exercise that it requires quite some resources, so we don't think that it can be applied to all projects. So the criteria on how to select the projects is an important detail. And last, who performs the assessment? Will it be ENTSO-E at a pan-European level, which would ensure a common methodology, a consistency of the implementation of the methodology, comparability of the results? But on the other hand, it's more difficult for ENTSO-E to do so and incorporate also the local knowledge of the specificities of each grid, or the national TSOs who have the local knowledge and may have the local resources and may be also very interested from a national perspective. So this is something that I think we need to discuss and maybe receive views from other participants so that ENTSO-E is helped to continue this task. And the third step, the evaluation of the lost load. ENTSO-E has already experience on using the value of lost load in terms of adequacy. However, in this case, the value cannot be the same because the expected duration of the outages is going to be quite longer. It may last weeks and definitely more than 1 day. So the VOR analysis have to be expanded to produce a different VOR. Another thing to say is that this value should be the VOR without pre-notification. So the ERA surveys could be used with some extension, so extending the questionnaire in the cases where this questionnaire is implemented to cover longer interruption durations. And another issue to be discussed, and it's also an issue for the adequacy VOL used, what value to use for countries where no VOL calculation takes place, because there are many, because according to the regulation, this VOL calculation takes place only in specific cases where capacity mechanisms are used, so not all countries calculate this value. I think this is the end of my presentation. I hope it was short and set the framework and also the questions. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel, for this presentation. And I think that you raised very important topics and some of the questions. And I see already that Niels raised his hand, and also Jose here in the room, so that maybe we can start either addressing these questions or putting new ones into the discussion. So Niels, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have one question related to the application that you foresee for this methodology. You said that ENTSO-E has limited resources in the TYNDP, which is obvious, and I think everyone knows about that we cannot do everything, and that scenarios or additional and adjusted scenarios and sensitivities are more or less not that applicable. But in your proposal, you say that under step 1, we determine the critical events, which is okay. And in step 2, you say that the ENS should be calculated. Do you foresee here a full year-round calculation for this, or what is your expectation about this? How this should be done then? Because if it's a year-round full simulation, then it's basically just a sensitivity calculation that is applied based on the critical events that are determined earlier on and adjusted to the scenarios.
I think this will be driven by the critical event itself, the duration of the event. So an examination for the period that the event is expected. So if we are talking about extreme snowfall, this will happen at a specific time of the year. So this specific moment will be examined. If we're talking about extreme heat, then a different time period it will be examined. So I don't think we need a year-long calculation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And then José.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Emmanuel, for the presentation. You brought the view from the regulators, I would say. It's very important for TSOs that I'm representing here, Portuguese one, the only one in Portugal. This kind of event, extreme events, they are don't happen many times, hopefully. But when they happen, they bring us big problems, and sometimes we have not weeks but months to repair. From that point of view, what you see when you see simulations, once you see looking at an aircraft, we have to look at from different aspects. What you see could be different aspect we should look when we look for a net that can have a big problem that even though that you don't have towers to replace some problems, how can we improve to make the net more secure, because these events are going to happen. I like to see a more profound view from your regulator's perspective. What you can see from do regulators make simulations from these aspects? That was my main question.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I don't know if the point of view of simulations, this kind of aspects of loss in the grid, some part of the grid for many months, I would say maybe a year, it could be a big problem for the TSO, for the country. Do we make simulations for this?
This is what we're discussing now, extending the current simulations, so you can calculate in numbers what is the energy loss in such an event. Well, I don't believe it's going to be a year or many months, but maybe many weeks it could be. So the purpose of this exercise, I think, is to show the impact in the case of such events. So calculating what would be the impact on the current grid and compare to another grid with a project that improves the resilience of the system. And this is the contribution of this project to resilience of the system.
My question is, suppose, but we have a problem at the north of Portugal that to repair, we have to, I would say, 3 months to repair. It was very difficult because we have to make that net more resilient. We have to make a new project with different things that they were where they are happened that event. That's why these new events can be different, because you have to make different projects to repair, not to make the same thing, but to make new things. And my question is, do you realize sometimes this could be months to repair?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Would you like to add something more? Or no. I also see a raised hand by Paul. So please go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I understand that the values of loss of load would be different than the one used for adequacy assessments. Do you expect that it would be higher or lower than the one previously used? And my second question is that, so I understand that you suggest to run sensitivities on extreme events to assess the value of additional assets, infrastructure assets in case of extreme events. Would you then apply this added value with a probability of occurrence to get one single overall value of the added asset, which integrates the value in case of extreme events? And if so, how would you compute or estimate this probability of occurrence for extreme events.
Okay, regarding the first question on comparison on the value of lost load compared to the current one, we expect that it will be higher because it's a value without notification, contrary to the value calculated right now. So this is the expectation. Regarding the probability of the events, I think this we don't see that there will be a compound indicator to combine all the benefits of the projects in one. So you need also some probability for the occurrence for to incorporate this indicator with the others. So from my perspective, I see that this indicator will be a standing alone indicator, which will show the contribution of the project to resilience.
All right, that's very clear.
I don't know if there are other views, and maybe there are other ways to incorporate also in the overall assessment of the project of this indicator.
Thanks a lot. Yes, Paul, you wanted to? No. Okay. Thank you very much. I also have a question regarding the first step of the proposed methodology, or maybe something that TSOs joining this meeting can also share. So you mentioned that in the first step, the identification of the critical or extreme events should take place by specific institutions, research institutions, or meteorological ones. In your mind, does it require a specific additional regulation on that and giving a mandate to these institutions, or giving a mandate to a TSOs asking for such information or such analysis? Or maybe, and this is a question more to the TSOs, whether this is already taking place, that you are collaborating with the meteorological institutions in your countries, and this process is already kind of embedded in your work. So that's my question. How would you foresee that, and how is it in reality?
Well, I don't think we have very specific ideas on this. I think the contribution of the TSOs of the current experience is going to be very important and valuable to trace what is happening right now, what is available, what data is available, whether there is any European project that can provide such data also at the granularity that is needed. Of course, we don't have a clear view on this, but I think that the TSOs who will present today, and also the ones who join this meeting, will provide their views on this, and we will have more knowledge at the end of this meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. And maybe José and then Federico, I know that you are online. Maybe can you share maybe your experiences on that? Or working together, or collecting information from relevant institutions in your countries? Are you working with those?
Well, from the point of view of Portugal, as I said, we had some extreme events. Then I want to present, and we are always happy to join and to be helpful to our regulators. And but when we have the problems, we talk with our regulators.
But are you talking about extreme events, historical extreme events, or about expected future ones? Because here, this is the difference. We're not talking about the past, because unfortunately, what we expect is that the future will be much worse than the past. Yeah. So, of course, TSOs are able to get the historical data and make an analysis on them. But here the issue is to see which conditions we have to expect in the future. And of course, this is something that pertains to the research and climate institutions.
Yes, we are happy to be helpful on that. As you said, looking to the past is important to be overcome the future. Mm-hmm. That's why we are here and you are interested on all things that could we do to overcome some problems that we can have in the future. Yes, we are able to. You are here to from the point of view of Portugal or TSO, as Portugal is REN is in Portugal, where I available to this discussion. Yeah.
Thank you. And among the online participants, I see that Videt raised her hand. So please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you speak up again, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Yes. Yeah, so yeah, with it from the German Aerospace Center. So the question is about yeah, if there are contacts between the TSOs and the institution that provide, let's say, extreme events. Maybe just a note that we are also with RGI in one of those really small projects, which is the Destination Earth, which is a project from ECNWF that tries to create a digital twin of the Earth. And in the future, it would be also possible for TSOs and also DSOs to get easily access to such data sets. And also we're trying to bring the TSOs to use such data. So to take the burden of dealing with energy meteorology data sets and to try to make it easier for them also to create tools between their models where they simulate what is important for them and also between this digital twin. So it's in like to reduce the burden in using such data sets, maybe as just a remark.
Some clarification. Can you please tell us who is participating in this project?
So Destination Earth, yeah, it's not only for the energy sector. So it's just try to provide some meteorological data set for a lot of, let's say, sectors. And the main, let's say, provider of the data is ECMWF. So it's the European Weather Forecast service. And we are participating on the energy side together with RGI. And let's say we have lots of user meetings, including also different TSOs. So I can provide the link in the chat if you're interested.
Yes.
And maybe just heads up, this is also something that we have in our slides towards the end of the meeting to mention about this this project and this event. So yeah, and this is part of a bigger initiative financed by the European Commission, Destination Earth, which is a project up to 2030.
Oh, 2030.
Yes, with well, a long-standing project. The one that we are working on is going to conclude next year, but there are many steps up to 2030. So, yes, Rodrigo, I see your hand. Please.
Yeah, it's. I know we're here focusing mostly on the pan-European aspect, but just a curiosity. If the regulators in their own countries and if ACER can also support and promote that a similar thing is done inside the national plans, let's say, because many of these climate adaptation measures, they could have a lot of local impact and bring a lot of local benefit. So I'm just curious to see if and what is already happening on the national stage.
Well, for the national states, I think the present NRAs can provide more information about their experience in their countries. Regarding ACER, we're trying to incorporate this aspect in the European methodology. And of course, as happens with everything on the TYNDP, we want these methodologies to be paradigms also for the national plans. So they should be used as examples also for at the national level. But if any NRA has would like to mention more about their national plans, yeah, of course it's on you to say if it's possible.
Yeah, please, Holm, and yeah, just you need to press it.
Yeah, I'm from the German network regulator. So right now, these efforts have been ongoing for for a couple of years, but they are on hold now because we wait for the implementation of the CER guideline from the European Union. It will change the resilience measures and how they are implemented in the energy sector as well. So most of these are on hold right now. But yes, we have been doing these things for a few years now. They are not currently monetized in any way. So this is more scenario planning, that certain scenarios are dealt with in certain ways, and require these resilience measures from the TSOs. So it is interesting to talk about ways to monetize it. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
And there's Pauline, I guess.
Yes, so about the French experience, like I'm from the French energy regulator. I think we have more or less the same experience as Germany. So the topic is currently being discussed. It's still on the table. I know that usually we were mostly dealing with extreme events occurring in the past. So we were focusing really on this kind of events, and now we are trying to incorporate more climate change extreme events. But yeah, that's also why it's very important to have this discussion with you to go faster on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, Rodrigo, I think that if this is the topic of the interest and you think that for your work, such exchanges of best practices or updates on the progress of the work, if this is something beneficial, I think it already delivers some input to the discussion in the afternoon, what shall be next steps of this work stream and how to proceed with development of that. But this is already a very valid point that you signalize. So many thanks for that. And if there are no other questions, yes, there are questions in the room. So first, Maciek, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just a question a bit outside of the presentation. Thank you for the presentation, because we are just looking at the impact of the projects on the in case of the outages. But you also mentioned the performance of the project. So would there be something consideration of the impact of OPEX, something to be considered because of the climate events that would affect this, also the performance and the impact of other benefits of the projects because of the extreme events? Is it something you think should be considered, or it would be too detailed?
I mentioned performance of the projects in terms of their impact on the energy non-served. So if their performance has an impact on this, it is taken into account. Now about a lower performance of transmission projects, you mean? I don't think this is part of this approach, but maybe it has to do with the overall approach of the planning and the modeling of the TSOs on the usage of the elements of the network. So yeah, I don't think it's part of this approach. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And there was also Andrea.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. My question is actually related.
Just maybe, sorry to interrupt. Can you introduce yourself and which organization?
Andrea Gasparella from the Joint Research Center, European Commission. So my question is, but thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. There was a lot of focus on unserved energy, but of course, climate resilience is also about not just the unserved energy, but also the cost of the energy. Like how much does the energy cost to society, and also the physical damage that was also mentioned earlier. Like we could have climate change, so especially in the future where the system is becoming more flexible, we might actually be able to serve the demand, but at what cost? Because there will be more flexibility, more demand response, so we can also reduce the demand, but at what cost are we willing to reduce that and so avoid unserved energy? So that's the first question. And the second one is also that we need to look at the physical damages of the grid, which is not necessarily captured by the unserved energy value, which is something more like you could have blackouts, or maybe you could not have any blackouts, but there are billions of dollars of damages across the grid. So I guess how we can account for that factor as well. We could have some power plants affected, or some lines, part of the grid which goes down as well, but no serious blackouts. So that's also something to consider. And then finally, on the granularity of the model, that was a raised question that you pointed out. I really think depends what type of problems we are trying to answer here. If it is more like an energy economics problem, then perhaps we need to look at it from an energy market bidding perspective. So we look at the bidding price zones across Europe, and so we can make an assessment how the project is benefit or not in terms of total cost to society. Again, if we have any outages, what's the cost and how we can share it across different countries. But I see that there is also a high need to go at a much higher granularity at national levels, looking at both transmission network and also distribution networks, which are not necessarily completely linked to the market energy behaviors, looking more at the inter-European dynamics. So I see these two things quite related, but also a bit separated, the market benefits and then more the physical network analysis. So just a couple of comments, because this is some of the issues or challenges also that arises in our work when we analyze these type of problems, because you can analyze them both from the energy market perspective, but also on the network side. So it's,
yeah, well, I think they are very up to the point comments, but I think they cover all the aspects of climate change and resilience and the impact on the markets and the grids. But here we're trying to focus on a topic, so on the impact on the contribution of projects to resilience, and we're talking about transmission projects. So we're trying to tackle this aspect, and I think by tackling different aspects, in the end we can have the overall. But of course, it's not possible to have a generic perspective by trying to incorporate this in the CBA.
My challenge there will be that everything is becoming more and more interconnected. So transmission project is, you cannot analyze the benefit of a transmission project in isolation, because everything, all the elements are coming together, like a distribution network, more and more renewables capacity is at the distribution network. So behind the meter, we have electric vehicle, heat pump, flexibility, batteries, and then you have the transmission network. So these two, in my mind, and perhaps, I'm wrong here, but they are extremely interconnected.
Yes, but all these aspects, I think, all these aspects are already should be taken into account by the TSOs and ENTSO-E when they simulate the grid. So they have to take into consideration these aspects on the performance of the grid and how the grid behaves. So definitely this should be reflected, but in these specific fields, and not by introducing some new indicator, as we're trying to do here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I've seen also a hand raised by Ricardo. So please go ahead.
Hello, good morning to all. Sorry for not having been able to come to Brussels. I have to be with our board later this morning. I'm Riccardo Veilati from the Italian regulator, co-convener of the Electricity Infrastructure Task Force. And the Italian regulator, I'm responsible for energy infrastructure investment plans and quality. Earlier, there was a statement on lower performance. I would like to ask what lower performance could mean. If it is a matter of lower availability, can it be counted in the calculation of project benefits as a reduction of projects benefits delivered by a counterfactual project, meaning that it was mentioned by our Portuguese colleague before, we can assume that there will be an asset failure with an unavailability for some months. If the asset is unavailable for some months, it means that in the counterfactual, meaning the case without the project under assessment, the situation will be worsened by the unavailability of asset. This means that for a resilience-related project, the difference between the with situation and the without project situation, the difference in terms of project benefits will tend to be higher. So, we assume that the resilience-related project will solve or mitigate the unavailability. And if we count in the counterfactual the unavailability of alternative assets, we will probably have an effect of not only of saving unserved energy, avoiding unserved energy, but also have, for instance, a socioeconomic welfare benefit, which is potentially more significant for the resilience-related project. So I would ask if possible to please dig further into the concept of lower performance, which I understood attributed to, let's say, traditional assets which are not resilience fit for purpose. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ricardo. Emmanuel, you want to refer to that? No. Anyone else? But I see that Catherine raised her hand, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Catherine Banet. I'm a professor at the University of Oslo, and I'm a research fellow at the Center on Regulation in Europe. And we published earlier this year a report on resilience of grid operators. I just have a question following the fact you mentioned monetization of resilience, and I was wondering whether there is already a common approach as to monetization, because as far as I understand it, no. But if you can further elaborate on what are maybe the alternatives that you have already identified. You mentioned vol, but vol may not cover all the events and the unpredicted events in the future. And that's something that also we discussed earlier with Ricardo as well, the question of monetization. And the follow-up question is a bit more naive, being outside regulatory work or TSOs. Is there a link with the work of the DSOs? And the implementation, because they will be in the forefront of any such events, first impacted, and the time to transfer the methodological elements to the DSO level, it will be quite late. So how do you anticipate also at the NRA's level the link with the DSO? Thank you.
Thank you, and go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there's currently no monetization. There is no even quantification. So we're discussing the whole concept here. So we're putting on the table ideas on how to proceed. And the proposal is to have a value. I mean, after you find the contribution of the project in the reduction of energy non-served, you need a factor to monetize this. The issue is how to come up with this factor per country. And what we say is that the current vol is not appropriate. It's not enough because it's calculated under different circumstances. So we need a different vol for this case. So that's what we say. And of course, the details we have to discuss and find how to proceed. And of course, all these topics may even be more relevant for DSOs than TSOs, because the transmission system may have more planning, a better structure. Yes, it has N-1 planning. It has already foreseen some failures and how to provide energy without problem, even with some failures, which is not the case with the distribution network. So the resilience issue for the distribution is maybe even more important. But here, I think today we're discussing the transmission system, and of course, experience can be expanded to the distribution as well in the future. But this is something for the future, I guess.
Yeah. Another important point to think about the next steps. So thanks a lot, and I think we are a bit behind the schedule. So, but thank you very much for this discussion because it already provided very interesting perspectives. And now I would like to give floor to Niels, who is going to provide the introduction how currently these aspects have been tackled within the CBA methodology. And Niels, do you want to share your screen, or shall I do that and proceed with the presentation?
I can share my screen. That should be no problem.
Okay, perfect.
I'm just. So are you able now to see the presentation?
Yes, it's still not in the. Yes, now it's in the presentation mode, so everything's working.
So wait, I need to set up myself. No, not this one, but this one. Okay. Basically, what I would like to give to you now is a quick and brief overview about the CBA guideline itself. So what are we doing here and what are we talking about, where to implement this, what we are currently discussing. And it was good already to have this fruitful discussion started in the beginning and beforehand. So now let's focus on what exactly we are going to do here. And I would like to give you an overview about the CBA guideline in very general. So hopefully I don't bore you because you are so familiar with it. And in the end, I will give an overview about what we currently have for the climate adaptation measures and climate resilience. So first of all is an overview about how the CBA 4 guideline has been developed. So we are currently in the fourth version of the CBA guideline, which is of course based on a regulation 869. I still need to get used to this new number. So the 10-year regulation, where we have the need to draft a CBA guideline, and it was required to publish the CBA guideline by this year. And it is a constant development from previous versions. So it's nothing that we have now developed from scratch. So we have started with the first version and then built on top of this the second version, and then using this as a basis for the third and the fourth version now finally. To all of these steps from the first to the fourth version, we have of course always considered consultation feedback from public. Each of the versions were run through a public consultation, also the fourth CBA guideline by beginning of this year. And we were at ENTSO-E always in direct contact with ESA and also with the European Commission to get direct feedback and discussions together with them, where we also get a lot of feedback. And I think we had a fruitful work together to amend the CBA guideline in a way that all of the parties are kind of more satisfied than without these discussions, I would say. So, and in this version of the CBA guideline, we also fostered a little bit more the discussion with the ENTSO-E colleagues, as this is also a direct requirement from the 10E regulation. But also not just besides of this, it also makes sense to align better between ENTSO-E and ENTSO-E on the CBA guidelines themselves, on the methodologies. So that's what we have considered. And just to give you a brief overview about the process, how this all works and comes together to get a feeling of what we can do right now with this discussion on this new methodology that we are currently doing today. Because for the fourth CBA guideline, which is already quite advanced in the process, it will be not impossible, but it will be a challenge to implement any new methodologies that would require a lot of thoughts and work in it, because we are already in the stage that you can see here in the end for the EC approval. What has been done so far is we have started with the CBA 3 guideline and have drafted then an implementation guideline based on the CBA 3 guideline. So to explain it to you, we have the CBA guideline, which is the general document giving the general concepts. And then for each of the TYNDPs, we are drafting an implementation guideline which transfers the concepts to the real application in the TYNDPs, giving more details, giving more data, and giving an overview, so that following the implementation guideline, one should be able to perform the CBA guideline as the CBA assessment. All information is in this, and this is what we have used as a starting point for the drafting of the 4th CBA guideline. It is based on the implementation guidelines, because in the implementation guidelines we are also addressing new methodologies and concepts that can then be directly tested in the TYNDP. And if this turns out fruitful, then it will find its way into the CBA guideline itself. The official process then more or less started with the starting of the public consultation, which was held end of last year till beginning of this year. And after this, we were going back, redrafting the CBA guideline, considering the public consultation feedback. And by 24th of April, we were submitting the CBA guideline to ACER for their opinion, having received the opinion from ACER on 19th of July this year. And after this, we at ENTSO-E were given 3 months time for amendments in the CBA guideline. This is also requirement, or this whole process is denoted in the 10E regulation itself. So this is nothing that ENTSO-E has to decide about how long and when and what. This is basically then from the official process from the 10E regulation. So after this 3 months time, which was yesterday, exactly, we submitted the CBA guideline to the European Commission, with the amendments taken from the ACER opinion, and also we have received already on a working level some comments from the European Commission, which we were also to some extent taking into consideration in the amendments. And now we are more or less waiting for the European Commission for getting the approval. And after we getting the approval by the Commission, ENTSO-E will have 2 weeks of time to publish the CBA guideline on the webpage. So basically, we are currently now here in the last step, basically waiting for the European Commission approval. So in 3 months' time, we would know more about the CBA guideline, the 4th version. But of course, within this process, as in the past for the CBA 3 and CBA 2 guidelines as well, we were getting this approval, or for the third CBA guideline, we were not getting the approval, but that is another story. But for the second one, we were getting the approval after having added additional amendments. So it's still possible to amend together with the agreement by the European Commission, the CBA guideline, to getting then the final approval in the end of this process. So it's not yet closed in terms of discussions and improvements, but it is in the very last stage, let's say. And to give you an overview about this CBA guideline itself, the methodology fits into the whole process of the TYNDP, and then also maybe the PCI process and the PMI process. I would like to give you a very brief overview about how this all stacks together. So basically, we are having here in the lower corner the cost-benefit analysis, which is now to be seen as the real doing of the cost-benefit analysis, which is of course based on the CBA guideline and then transferred to the implementation guideline for its real application. But all of these boxes here are within the TYNDP process, starting with the scenarios, of course. So scenario building is in this perspective not a part of the CBA guideline itself, although we are having some requirements in the CBA guideline related to the scenarios. But in principle, when it comes to the CBA assessment, the scenarios are already a year old, more or less, and all of the discussions have taken place there. So there is no much more space for amendments in the scenarios when the CBA phase starts already. Then we have collection of projects, which is internal process. By the way, for the TYNDP 24, it is already going on, or basically it has the first round of submission window has already closed. And then we have an identification of system needs. And after this, we are going to the cost-benefit analysis to do the real project assessment. And all of this with the main purpose, I would say, it's not the only purpose, but it's, of course, the biggest impact has the project of common interest, the PCIs, and the project of PMI of mutual interest, the PMIs, which will be fed in by the result of the TYNDP, basically of the CBA assessment phase. So that's a brief overview. And for the modeling environment, I would like to give you also an short overview what we are doing here. So basically, from left to right, you see what it is related to. Then in the middle, you see the models and framework that we are using. And on the right-hand side, it's the outcome, the CBA indicators that are achieved by these simulations. So basically, we're having three parts. We're having project promoter input, so direct input by the project promoters, which are, for example, the residual impacts, project costs, and the technical criteria and data of the projects. Then we're having the scenarios that are built by the scenario building in the whole process of the TYNDP. By the way, also together already with the ENTSO-E, so with the gas TSOs. And then we're having the grid models that is also already prepared in the very beginning. And then we are performing market simulations, and the outcome from the market simulations will then be used also for grid simulations. And out of the grid simulations, we will get the CBA network indicators, which are, for example, the grid losses. And from the market simulations, we will achieve the direct CBA market indicators. So that's just a brief overview. You can find also more information about this in the current CBA 4 guideline, which has been, I think the latest public version really was the version that we were sending to ACER, but I think also the version that is sent to the European Commission can also be accessed at the ENTSO-E SharePoint. In the end, we will having in the CBA guideline 3 categories of indicators. We are having for the project assessment, the benefit indicators, while here we need to say losses, for example, is also considered as benefit indicator, and losses, of course, can be negative, but the benefit can also be positive. So benefit just means it is an indicator that we can achieve, and it is mainly positive, so therefore it's mainly a benefit, but there can also be negative benefits, let's say. Then we're having costs, which is basically the project costs themselves, so the CapEx and the OpEx. And we have residual impacts, which is some additional information that we are getting from the project promoters directly, like impact on the environment and on social impacts and stuff like that. But here you can see now the more detailed overview about all of these indicators that we are having in the CBA guideline. So we're having the benefits, we're having the costs and the residual impacts. This is translated from the slide before. And what we are approaching here is a multi-criteria approach, which means that in the end, we will not just have one value as the benefit outcome of the assessment, but we will have several benefit indicators, like, for example, the socioeconomic welfare, which by definition is monetized already. Then we're having CO2 variations, which is a part that is not monetized, RES integration, non-CO2, and grid losses, and adequacy, flexibility, and stability. So these, from the B6 indicator to the B8 indicator, these are system stability and system adequacy and system security indicators. And then we're having another indicator, the B9, which is related to redispatch calculations, can just be applied when redispatch calculations are being applied, and is also going into the direction of a security of supply indicator. And for the costs, we're having CapEx and OpEx, and indicators, residual impacts, environmental, social, and other indicators that are to be assessed as additional information to the project sheets. And with this in mind, I would like to go to the overview about where we are thinking to apply the climate adaptation measures. Currently in this 4th CBA guideline, we're having the climate adaptation measures applied to the CapEx, because as discussed earlier, I think today as well, basically to adapt the projects to possible future climate events, this needs to be considered in the project planning themselves, and which will basically come down then and fire back to the project costs themselves. So therefore, we have decided the climate adaptation measures are considered under the CapEx, which I will show in the next slide. And the climate resilience is an additional indicator, which we have also received from the Commission and also from ACER, the requirement that the climate resilience should really transform into an indicator calculation, as we have seen an example or proposal already by ACER earlier this morning. This would be one possibility, but yeah, we are currently also thinking about this. But for this current version of the CBA 4 guideline, we are just having a rough idea in the guideline, which I will show you on the next slide then. But this is now on the climate adaptation measures. The idea behind that is that we are addressing this indicator to the CapEx. So it's considered as a percentage of the CapEx. And we are asking in the TYNDP 2024 already the project promoters to provide some respective information on this based on the table that you see on the right-hand side. I don't want to go through all of the details in this table, as this is just an example for what we have in the CBA guideline or in the respective implementation guideline. So we're having the hazards in the first column, like the ocean pH, the wildfires, storms, including storm surge, floods, soil, coastal erosion, ground instability, ice jam, and stuff like that. So these are the main hazards that we have considered as I would say this is still a starting point for the methodology because it's the first time that it's applied. And it is, of course, a field of discussion. I know there can be other hazards that need to be considered, or maybe something you don't see as relevant, what we have quite added here to this table. But for the moment, it's what we are going in the TYNDP 24. Then we have a short explanation of the adaptation. And then this is the field where the project promoter needs to put their percentage for the CapEx in. And finally, we have also already a direct link, let's say, to the resilience, because any adaptation that we make based on climate constraints will also be directly linked to making the whole system more resilient, which is then a benefit or can be seen as a resilience impact indicator. But this then needs to be addressed in a separate indicator, which we currently just have in the CBA guideline or in the implementation guideline as a very brief description and just giving the idea. So basically, this is nothing that can be really applied, but this is exactly why we are having this workshop today, to come with a proposal and some stuff that we can use at ENTSO-E level to really develop an indicator for this calculation of the climate resilience. And yeah, that was the first part for the implementation of our overview about the CBA guideline. And if there are yet questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Niels. Yes, and I see already the first question and hand raised by Ricardo. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Niels, for the very detailed explanation of the CBCA processes. First consideration is that I think Europe survived in the last 6 years without a CBA approved. So I would focus not much on the approvals, but on the real work and the real implementation. You raised, if I understand correctly, a possible complexity or intention to define a new indicator, which is a possibility to be investigated. But to me, it's also important to use the existing indicators, implement and improve the implementation. some impacts. Now I'm confused because I'm writing now a document and I'm going to have a discussion on the gas CBA in a couple of minutes with our board. But if I remember well, energy not supplied could be numbered B6 or whichever the number. The energy not supplied benefit is one of the benefits where the implementation details are important. And as I mentioned before, to try to trigger some discussion, also the impact of different assumptions on the other benefit to me is potentially significant. So it's not much a matter, or not only a matter of a new indicator, which may be meaningful, but it will require time to identify it. It's also a matter of implementation with new approaches and new assumptions of the current CBA framework. Because, guys, maybe it's not common that we congratulate with ENTSO-E, but we still believe that even if not approved for 6 years, the ENTSO-E CBA is quite a valid document. So it's not a matter of doing something revolutionary. Already implementing better the existing ENTSO-E CBA, it would be an important step. Yep. I would ask your reflection on that, and of course, inputs by all are welcome.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, first of all, for the acknowledgement of the CBA guideline itself as a document. And of course, this is, I just named it now here, additional indicator. Or I separated this here, but this does not mean that we are not thinking also about to linking this to the two indicators that we currently have. So let's say to getting additional information out of the indicators that we have, creating some new information out of this. So this is absolutely also within the possibility of the discussions here. So I don't want to neglect the idea about getting information of what we already have, but just reinterpreting it, or by adding some specific parts on these indicators to get additional information out of that, going to the direction of the climate resilience. So that is for sure still open for discussion.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, I see Emmanuel.
Yes. Okay, I go first. Yes. Okay, so I understand that your current approach is that what you consider to take into account climate adaptation measures is to increase the capex of projects by a percentage, as you say here in the first bullet, consideration percentage of the capex. But how do you think? How are you thinking of doing it? I mean, will you ask the TSOs and the promoters to think of this table and think of measures they can take for their projects, and then think and they propose what budget impact will have on the project? Is this the way you are going to it? Yeah, please.
Yeah. So first of all, this is just for the climate adaptation measures, of course. So it's not going to the direction of the climate resilience. This would then be the next step, let's say. But the idea behind that was that the project promoters are already planning their projects with having in mind some climate adaptation measures, because the project promoters will always build kind of resilient projects. And in the future, of course, the need and the pressure for building these resilient projects to the climate change and changing situation will become more important. So therefore, we think that it is already in the project promoter's mind, and they should then indicate of how much of the capex is already caused by these additional measures that they are taking into consideration here. And on the other hand side, so this was the first idea behind that. In the other hand side, it's also to give a hint to the project promoters that they are thinking more about these climate adaptation measures, so that they can add on top of their project plans and on the capex planning some additional things like we need to protect for wildfire, for example, and then they start thinking about, okay, what would it cost then in terms of capex, and this is what we are asking and requesting from the project promoters.
I see a risk here, because if you just ask the promoters without having this first step that we identified which are the extreme events and what are their impact on its geographical area, that you get this extra capex for projects that do not really need it. So I think the first identification step is important to have an answer on which projects are affected, because they're not all affected the same way. And
yes, absolutely agree with that one. But for the moment, that was the first step that we could achieve in this period for the TYNDP 24. Because this additional information that you're talking about, where are the relevant areas, let's say, this is something that we have not yet achieved to implement in the guideline as well. But this is definitely something that would make sense and should be here as well, because it makes no sense to have a flooding increased capex in a region where no water is. So basically. Yeah,
so I think the guidelines should say that the TSO should be in communication with the climate or weather institutions of the country, and provide some indication that these projects are in areas which are affected by climate change. So this is at least something that needs to be taken in consideration. And sorry, another comment, I don't want to monopolize. But yeah, also regarding what Ricardo mentioned, it's first of all, you have, I understand you have submitted the CBA to the Commission, so maybe it's a bit late to change something now. But in the implementation guidelines, you have the freedom. That's why we have the implementation guidelines to say what to present what you will implement for this for the next TYNDP, and we know that there is quite some freedom there. So I think the approval of the CBA should not be a limiting factor for you to proceed with some improvements in the implementation already in the coming TYNDP, even if it's in a showcase basis for some projects, but at least to have a progress compared to the previous TYNDP, instead of only considering additions in capex for some projects.
Yeah, that is indeed also our plan, to get the information out of this workshop and to transfer it then into the implementation guideline itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And there was a hand raised by Elko here in the room. So please go ahead.
Yes, Elko Cox. I'm assistant professor at the VU in Amsterdam, and I'm a project coordinator of a New Horizon Europe project on climate adaptation of critical infrastructure. So I think I'm at the right place here to get some input and hopefully provide some feedback. So maybe one point also raised now, I think that academia can really help with identifying which assets are exposed, but I think Svenja's presentation will also really highlight some of that as well. Maybe a little bit on the climate adaptation, and yeah, maybe this is already considered, but I think it's quite essential to also take a bit of a multi-hazard angle as well, as in we can of course raise assets for wildfire or floods, but it then of course increases its vulnerability to earthquakes. So it might be something to consider, that adapting to one hazard may actually cause maladaptation to another hazard. Just something to take into account. And maybe one point of a question on the resilience definition. Of course, I know that when we talk about definitions, we can spend all day talking about that. But maybe just for me to understand it better. So if I read it now, it seems you mainly focus on resilience at an asset level, whereas normally we also tend to look at resilience more at a system level, like including also network redundancy. And that does not necessarily seem to be covered in this resilience, right? It's really focused on strengthening the asset and recovering the asset.
Yeah, so I think for the definition of the resilient, we have another session today, so we can talk about this. And I think we have already updated this. This is just a screenshot from what we have in the CBA guideline itself. I wanted to give you this overview. So for the current process, we already have proceeded, and also before this workshop, we have sent around, or the RGI has sent around a document with a definition of climate adaptation and climate resilience. And I will show this also later in today. And then we can discuss in more detail about that. But thank you. It's this interlinkage between, so your first comment with the interlinkage between the adaptation measures is also an important thing that we can internally discuss about in the team.
Yeah, thank you very much. And without, oh, sorry, I didn't see. Holm, please.
Yeah, I have a question that might also be better later, because it's similar to the one that was just asked. My question is, the definition of resilience, or definitions of resilience, usually include varying degrees of resilience to unexpected events rather than the ones that can be forecast. So my question is how you interpret this part of resilience, how much resilience measures should focus also on unexpected, unquantifiable events, because at that point there is no clear numerical indicator anymore, because by definition it is not a predictable or quantifiable event that you are preparing for.
That's basically a good question, but if it's not quantifiable, then it's maybe not the proper space in the CBA guideline, or we are making it as a quantitative indicator and additionally to what we can quantify, a qualitative indicator to what we can quantify as well. But yeah, that's kind of a problem in this perspective. Yeah.
Okay, and the last question, because we need to proceed with the further presentation. But José, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I know you are tackling with time. And from this helping what Hans said, you were explaining, I would say that the project, when we do the project, we have to see from the point of view, like Emmanuel was saying, what is our climate drivers, climate institutions in each country should see and adapt maybe the project, this new project, to these new different statements, and maybe this could be a driver to the costs. Maybe.
Thank you very much for this comment. And now, since it was already mentioned in the discussion, that is important to understand what are the hazards in order to identify the measures. I will give floor to Svenja Surminski, who is the managing director of in Mark. I forget this. It's always so confusing. But also the professor at London School of Economics, and will give us an overview on the differences of the potential climate change impacts across Europe. So, Svenja, the floor is yours.
Okay, many thanks for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be here. I think some of you have met me in March at that first event that we did on this topic. I know I'm starting with minus 25 minutes, so I don't know how quickly you want me to talk, but okay. I also, that there is an option, so I guess I will focus on a few topics that also came up in the discussion here. And then later on, there's another session where I give maybe some practical examples. So, you know, we can just, because I think it's really important that we also have a discussion. So, you know, that is basically, you know, my sort of message or the input I was planning to make. And while I was listening to all the comments, I sort of almost ticked off a lot of the comments that were made. So, you know, you know, this is kind of almost like a good summary, I guess, where I think, based on my experience, sort of I've been working in the adaptation space for a long, long time, as an academic, but also as a practitioner, and now I also advise government on the sort of monitoring of adaptation. So, I think, a lot of these points we've made, and I just want to illustrate some here. And the starting point that, adaptation is really a process and it's not a one-off intervention. So I think that sometimes, you make an investment, you make a decision. It's need to be continuously assessed. So I think a kind of process around that is important. And adaptation pathways is an approach that, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I work with companies, but also with regulators on that. And it's kind of ensuring that, there is this mechanism. I think identifying urgency, timing, and scale is important, because sometimes it's just this question of, do we have to do everything at once? And I think you meant a comment there is like, there might be stuff that we don't need to do. So, we have to have a sort of sensible approach. And I think, this is the weighing pragmatism, practicality, and robustness, but fitness for the future. So, my part as an academic, I can tell you, what really would be the most robust and future-proof approach. But I'm conscious that there's sort of sometimes a trade-off between practicality, pragmatism. I would think having a list of principles is probably helpful. And I think what is really important is to have some clarity on treatment of data, uncertainty, and return periods, and how that is, how basically, the users or whoever is doing the CBA should deal with that, because, you also have to have some level playing field. And in my experience, there can be very different approaches to that. The other points, I guess, I'll just sort of quickly touch on when I go through my slides. But I want to say something about monitoring adaptation. That's the last bullet point there, because that's also really important. And I'll just share some insights on that from the UK, where I sit on the Committee on Climate Change, and we're basically tasked with monitoring adaptation across sectors, and infrastructure and energy is one of those. So I'll just share the methodology that we're using there. And before I just go down into some examples, I just wanted to flag, we've heard obviously the connection to various EU regulations. I don't know if I've not heard it, but I just wanted to flag there's obviously a very close alignment with the EU taxonomy, and on the sort of sustainable investment side, and what actually qualifies as an adaptation investment, which kind of, maybe I just didn't click, but I think there are lots of analogies, and sort of what actually defines how adaptation is defined there, and what you need to do to prove that you're actually investing in adaptation. So just one comment that was made earlier. I think it's important that we clarify what we mean when we assess the impacts, and are we looking at assets, systems, and interdependency? So ideally at all three. But this also really depends on who the stakeholder is, and I guess that seems to me one of the key questions, just to clarify, what the ambition is. Ideally, all three, and particularly the interdependency part is important. And I'll give you one example. So I don't want to go into detail here, but I'm supposed to talk also about our hazard understanding, and maybe picking up Elko's comment. I always say, look, we've never had better data on the hazard side, but do we understand and do we utilize the data as well as we could? And I think, well, the answer is no, but I think there is a lot of really good material on the hazard side. But I think it's also important that we understand the limits, and how to read also the uncertainty that come with the hazard assessment. I'll skip that. You're all familiar with that. I don't have to tell you about these sort of experiences which are usually quite good narratives to also explain, and I think somebody was mentioning unprecedented, and, people say we're surprised, this has never been happened before. Well, that's exactly what climate change is about. So maybe only my only comment is, when we do these assessments, when we do the CBA, we tend to look at this as a very linear process. And we kind of look for, for the scenarios to help us set out, what could happen. But the problem is with the climate system, similar with the sort of nature system and ecosystem, it's very messy. And, the big challenge is that it is not linear, but, there are lots of surprises in the system. And I think that sort of mindset is important here. Again, there is good assessment data, and I think it is constantly evolving. You'll be familiar with this from the European Environmental Agency, which kind of looks at the different layers of, energy systems and the impacts, and you probably have seen this. I think then, there are various EU research projects. There's really good data coming out of these research projects. My question would be, how can that be utilized and accessed? Because you then have also a lot of country level assessments. And yes, this is not EU, this is the UK, but I'm just sharing it for illustration here, because, there are myriads of projects that are trying to unpack certain aspects. But what I often think is, are we connecting the dots? And I know at a European level, maybe you are connecting the dots very well, but I think, that's important to keep in mind, how you actually utilize the information around hazards. And I just wanted to show this. I think in the US, you probably are familiar or might have seen how they're approaching this in the US. I mean, I think they have, it's not perfect, but they have quite an interesting way of also visualizing it and playing around with that. You might have some views, would be really interested to hear your views on this. But in my experience, this is quite helpful. And then, obviously you can also break it down into different hazards. And just to echo, I mean, ideally, we also want to look at multi-hazards and see how these hazards might be influencing each other. But I mean, I think, this is just an example of how you sort of can break it down, look at key impacts, look at what the segments are, and then, identify potential adaptation strategies. But you obviously do that across different hazards. And then it becomes really interesting when you try and integrate this and put this into, a sort of systems assessment, or in this case, a service assessment. And I haven't designed this, and I'm not attempting to explain it. I just used it to show, and it is, I mean, I don't know if you do this, it just shows you how the different components are connected there. And I think, I've had many discussions with people who can, utilize existing systems analysis, because it's not that we are starting from scratch. I mean, obviously, resilience and security of supply, I mean, they're really good systems already in play. So I think the question is, how can we bring adaptation into that? And I think the point, just to reiterate, around interdependencies, and maybe interdependencies / interconnections, because they're obviously, sort of influencing factors that are outside, the energy grid, but influence it, but vice versa. So I think, I've just listed here, this comes from the Energy Networks organization, sort of an assessment that they did, where they flagged what these interconnections are. They haven't quantified it, but they at least they flagged and identified that. I wanted to say something briefly at the end also around monitoring adaptation. And, this is a report that the Climate Change Committee did in the UK, where we flagged some of the points that I also mentioned, this sort of system asset level resilience, and that it is important to consider these cascading impacts. But the simple answer is we have not found a good way of quantifying that. And analyzing it. What we're doing in the Committee on Climate Change is coming up with a sort of monitoring map. In this case, it's a monitoring map for energy. And we're basically starting with a vision, what's the whole ambition? And here you also see the link to net zero, so directly a link there. And then having these 3 outcomes. And then you start breaking it down, what are the indicators? What are enablers? And it's a tool to also identify who the stakeholders are and sort of, it sets out basically the different components of actually how we could get to the tool. And then we sort of use this to monitor adaptation progress. And I just thought that might be quite interesting because, there are then, some policy recommendations. But I mean, this is geared towards government, but, you could do the flip side and also gear this towards industry and operators. There's a lot to unpack. I know we are short on time, but I just wanted to briefly highlight that. And then just close by briefly, if I may, just going into the CBA question. And as a starting point, I mean, adaptation interventions and adaptation measures are wide and varied. So I think that's another important point. When you consider adaptation interventions, you really have a wide toolbox. And the first question, I guess, for this exercise would be, which of those would qualify? Which of those you would consider in the analysis? There are very fairly established ways of then calculating costs and benefits of adaptation. This is one example. This is another one. I think this is from the US, where you also then play with scenarios and with different types of adaptation and try to come up with some costings here. But I guess, it's really also a question of what for what purpose and how you want, how you can structure it. Because, ultimately, it's about establishing relationship between assets, systems, hazards, and damages. And you can build that system, but you need to connect knowledge and data. And I think that's why I think it's really exciting that this is happening. But I guess having some guiding principles on how to do that would be useful. Maybe the last very final comment. I mean, I think doing this right now is obviously there are lots of other risk drivers also influencing the sector, but at the same time, there's an opportunity because there are lots of investments, obviously in terms of, the consideration smart grid, net zero, there's also the nature agenda. So I usually say, try and make adaptation resilient as integrated as possible and, rather than seeing it as a standalone intervention. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. And happy to discuss any questions.
Thank you very much, Svenja, for this presentation and sharing a lot of insights with us. Are there any questions or comments to Svenja's presentation? Yes, Jose and then Emily. And among the online participants, I don't see yet. So please, Jose. Okay, Emily, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily from Climate Analytics, also more from working on the academic side of things and doing research on adaptation. And one of my research focuses is on constraints and limits to adaptation, which are actually like the factors that make it hard to implement adaptation, but also the points at which adaptation options and measures are no longer reducing risks and being effective. So I was wondering if you look into limits to adaptation also when considering different adaptation options and different scenarios, because I guess it's important to know the point at which some measures will become obsolete.
Yeah, I mean, I think in principle, it's a really important starting point to say adaptation is not going to work under all scenarios, and there are clear limits, and that should also reinforce the message that we have to get the mitigation side right, because adaptation is not an alternative. But I think it's probably also useful in the context of considering, really fundamental long-term decisions, like about where you build infrastructure, where you build assets and so on, or when you make these long-term considerations, to say, well, can we rely on, on certain asset protection levels? They might look okay now. Is it feasible? Is it economically feasible to upgrade, or shall we put it somewhere else? I mean, I think that's where this is already sort of starting to be factored in.
Okay, thank you very much. And José?
Oh, yeah. My question was more or less what Emily was question. Thank you for your presentation and your answer, because I've always my view of TSO and Portuguese TSO, and we have some problems with climate, and I would say so we can see, we can visualize, we can simulate, but we have always these scenarios, like Emily said. Sometimes that could be difficult to because you can do something for now and have good adaptation for that scenario, but the scenario could be worse on the future. So are we looking for information from our national weather institutes, national that could help us, like earthquakes, like colleague told us? Are we looking well to these things from the climate perspective view, this adaptation to this resilience? Should we look at these institutes that give us some more information about the future?
Wow, yeah. The simple answer is we have a tendency to underestimate, the possible impacts, because, and this is a complex discussion. I mean, I think when I talk to companies, but also governments, you need to base your decisions on something. So, there's an accepted level of what scenarios to use, what integrated assessment models to use. But when you unpack them, you can see the limitations in them. And one example is tipping points. I mean, this is like the scary stuff that is already going on, where we actually, none of these scenarios, or very few, properly consider that and the implications of that. I mean, if I mention that, people get very kind of scared and say, wow. And it's a fine balance, because I'm also not saying, we should look always through that lens. But I think what it means is that we just have to accept that we need to constantly revise and revisit this. And I think this is where this adaptation pathway concept comes in. I've seen it in practice a couple of times, where you basically map out certain points in time where you revisit the science, you revisit how long it would take to implement measures. And that is by design. So for the next 100 years, you know exactly when these points are and when you have to do it. And that gives you at least a bit of a plan, some pathways on how you can then navigate that. But yeah, that's kind of answer.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I don't see any. So I think that thank you very much, Svenja, for your presentation. Very insightful. And I think that now, after this discussion presentation, we deserve to have a short coffee break. I would suggest that we will cut the coffee break by 5 minutes, so then we can proceed with the next presentation, and we will have 15 minutes for coffee break and reconvene again 12:20. So thank you very much, and see you in a bit.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Moreira, as I said. I've been working for REN for 25 years, first 2 years in system operation, and then in power lines maintenance, and now in asset management. I will make a small overview of what we've been doing to increase resilience into our network. First of all, a small introduction about REN. REN is a TSO with operations on Chile, and our main area is Portugal, where we have more than 10,000 kilometers of gas and electricity network. REN is really committed to enable a renewable future. Portugal achieved 58% of electricity consumption from renewables sources in 2020 and 59% in 2021. Looking at decarbonization, we are committed to our national policies to renewable integration, decarbonization of our buildings and technical facilities. At the end of this year, we'll have 40% of our fleet electrical. From the point of view of carbon capture, we are making a good management of raw and facilities with sustainable strategies. We are reducing the average annual burning area and increasing the resilience of the network. So looking at resilience, it's important to notice that we have many different aspects of resilience. One of them is the resilience of the system with the new renewable sources. The decreasing use of synchronous generators are leaving less and less inertia in our system. Perhaps the future will be managing the system at its limits with new technology like dynamic light training or digital twin. REN intends to identify their benefits and advantages to the system. Other aspect of resilience is the design standards. We know that significant part of assets with 40 and 60 years old now were constructed with design standards different from now. New standards with 30 years are based on severe weather events, having a 3 or 5% of probability of exceedance over the design life. So they are stronger, but there is always some risk of failure during design life. To the random distribution of material properties, it is theoretically impossible to guarantee with 100% confidence level that the sequence of a failure will be met in all cases. I would say the primary climate drivers are these 6: temperature, precipitation, sea level, wind speeds, humidity, and solar radiation. In Portugal, we are most affected by temperatures and wind speeds. These drivers can result in diverse climate hazards. The more consistent in Portugal is wildfires, but we are affected by many others: heat waves, maximum wind speed, water availability, and coastal erosion. Looking now to major events in power lines, we experienced in 28th of February 2018 the freezing rain that affected 7 towers. Freezing rain phenomenon occurs when a warm air mass comes over a cold air mass, causing rain that freezes in contact with solid objects. Nowadays, ice formation zones on standards is 600 meters of altitude, but before it was 700 meters. It is interesting to notice that we observed this phenomenon even below the 600 meters. The cost of this rebuilding of these 21 towers, it was 2.6 million euros. Other event, it was provoked by Leslie storm that affected 13 towers. Standard says that a tower with 65 meters should withstand 152 kilometers per hour in Zone B. Zone B is 5 kilometers from coastal area. We registered 156 kilometers per hour, the highest wind gust ever in Portugal. But looking at damage on the field, our National Weather Institute, we call it IPMA, estimated 200 kilometers per hour. We spent 2 million to rebuild 13 towers. Finishing this major incidents, the major wildfire incident in Portugal. We call it Pedrógão Grand Fire at 18th of June 2017, where 66 people died, 204 were injured, In that year, we had more than 100 deaths between this fire, and the other one 4 months later in October. In Pedrógão Grande, witness reported a sudden bomb of fire spreading tons of flames and sparks in all directions. Specialists call it downburst, characterized by collapse of a convection column, resulting in rain or projections in interaction with the propagation front. At Juliel, estimated losses of almost 200 million euros. Well, fire risk in Portuguese forests are very high. So our network is heavily impacted by this risk, as you can see from the pictures. We spend around 100,000 euros every year in repairing. From this heat map, you see the small dots. As we can see, almost all network is affected by wildfires. During fire season, typically in summer, we have an average of 5,000 occurrences. In last summer, at 30th of July, we almost had 200 occurrences in one day to manage. In 2017, we developed a system based on RGI tools that, through a connection to our National Weather Civil Protection, we call it ANPC, give us in real-time information where wildfire starts. This system alerts field teams as well to our national dispatch and operational rooms. In 2021, we started a wider project with 20 entities, 70 researchers and technicians. In this project, REN installed 8 monitoring systems that allows network monitoring. The system consists of a main camera that detects smoke columns and hotspots, a secondary camera that tracks the events nearby, and a weather stations that monitors local conditions and sending them to our National Weather Institute, IPMA. This system has solar pylons, and the communication is done by fiber optics on the top of the tower. As shown in the image, camera allow the detection of smoke columns using AI. We are training the system to detect different shapes of smoke and to make autonomous detections. Also, with time-lapse, we can seek for the first image of the fire. We can also detect hotspots using infrared camera. Through this session, we can make pan, tilt, and zoom of the surveillance camera and see all the surroundings with a good quality of image. We can also see alarms, weather conditions, land elevation, and change cam direction with a click on the map. All that in real time. So we wanted to go further and stop focus on the start of the fire, but on the time and place it will impact our network. In this way, with the help of Universidade de Coimbra and awareness, we develop a system that allows fire propagation simulation and graphic visualization. Universidade de Coimbra developed the scientific part, look at weather condition, land elevation, calculated time and place of impact. Awareness, through the ESRI products, made the graphic visualization of those lines and which asset the fire will affect first. So the main conclusion of this replanned project are, we are no longer focused on the point of ignition, but on time and place of impact, on reduction of alerts, monitor wildfires outside the 5-kilometer buffer, better efficiency in activating prevention teams, and providing service to other entities, helping companies, helping communities. The next step is to scale up to 18 cameras, promote the integration of other cameras, other systems, and develop a control center. It's a project estimated 5.3 million euros, with expected participation of 40% of National Recovery and Resilience Plan, aligned with the Recovery and Resilience Mechanism promoted by European Council connected to Next Generation EU. Looking to our row, right of way, we have 35,000 hectares of right of way to manage, of which 66% are located in forest areas, where we have annually managed around 9,000 hectares. We spend around 8 million euros every year on this. To do this, we count on the collaboration of several service providers in the forest sector with a daily average that exceeds 200 workers. Integrating a sustainable strategy, our main goals is to protect our assets, creating territories that are more resilient to rural fires. To increase resilience to our infrastructures to extreme weather events, we need to adapt territories and energy infrastructures to ensure uninterrupted supply of energy. To do that, we eliminate trees outside the row with potential to affect conductors, and we do land reconversion. REN has overhead lines located in the Atlantic coast. It characterizes by strong winds and sandy soils, which offer little resistance to trees. These zones are characterized by strong winds that blow preferably from the northwest quadrant, perpendicular to the direction of the line. The experience of large trees, we call it eucalyptus, along these lines on sandy soils with poor support capacity for the tree root system, which combined with strong winds increase the risk of these large trees colliding with the conductors. Using LIDAR, once again, you see that Coimbra developed a methodology that helps to identify those trees outside the row, the 45, 60 meters outside the row. They look for many different aspects, the height, but also type of soil. As trees can be very long and near power lines, we had to use specialized teams, as you can see from the left image. We started with this program in 2020. It's a 10-year program, and we are spending around 300,000 euros every year. Other strategy was reconversion. We've been doing land reconversion for many years, you can see from the graph. Our purpose is to increase the resilience of our power lines, reducing fast-growing forest species, reducing maintenance costs, increasing property value that are often abandoned by landowners, and to promote biodiversity. From the last tenders, we are observing to 85% reduction in cost per hectare. We intend to reconvert 33% of our forest areas in 2030. We are spending around 400,000 euros every year on this. I conclude with this slide. This graphic represents the evolution of the plant with strawberry tree, compatible with the presence of power lines and with great economic interest to our landowners. It depends on the type of, I would say, the land, but I should say 500 to 1,000 euros per hectare every year. In 2022, it represented 86% of the planted area, with 240 hectares, and we expect to plant another 200 hectares in 2023. Thank you for your attention. And now I'm available for questions.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Jose, and also this presentation showing how different resilience measures in practice can address different hazards, and also what kind of how the benefits, how different dimensions the benefits can have. And yes, with this, are there any clarification questions or just quick follow-up questions from the participants? Yes, Elko?
Yes, thanks for the nice presentation. Just one quick question about the impact on biodiversity. I mean, I see clear benefits of cutting the trees. And I thought I saw that in some of the slides you said there was an improvement on biodiversity, but when you look at the pictures, it also seems to fragmentize the forest and cause a negative impact on biodiversity, which may then cause some discussion again with forestry managers. Like, did that cause any problems in your tactics?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's true. We look, I would say, in this slide, looking now biodiversity, but I would say, yeah, it's difficult to look at all aspects of the same way. But I would say our main purpose is the resilience of our network and to give some purpose to the landowners that are affected, because in Portugal the land steals a property from the landowner. In some other countries different, but in Portugal the land, even though we have the power line, is still from the landowner. And we still, with this project of the strawberry and other plants, I know we remove some from different trees that can be give problems to rent for rent, and we put another different ones. We could remove all that and put nothing there, because we can do that. But we're struggling to have something different with this example of the strawberry tree and other trees that can grow slow, because that's the main purpose. If you do nothing, you only cut, we can have more or less years problems with trees that can grow even higher, and so we have to spend a lot more money. So our purpose, yes, is to cut, is to leave the on the row clean row, and to put some trees that can be a value added to the landowner. I would say that's our main purpose, because the cost of cutting, the cost of cleaning is goes to rent.
Okay, thanks.
And maybe just to add on that, if you were interested in more approaches to the integrated vegetation management, there's quite some examples also on the RGI website. There's a dedicated workstream on integrated vegetation management, also proving what kind of additional benefits also to biodiversity this can bring. So there's some already knowledge on that collected. And I also see raised hand by Federico.
Yes, thank you. Also in Italy, the vegetation interference is very critical issue, and so the vegetation management is important. Have you also talked the use of satellite or drones? Because in Italy, related to the wildfires in particular, and so the vegetation, we have a pilot, a new project, and we start experimentation in the use of also not only the webcams, the IoT sensor, but also satellite.
Well, and this project, I didn't talk a lot about the satellites. We are we look at the row every year. We have a helicopter that goes every year on the row and look for problems. We digitalize the row every year, I would say. We do LiDAR, we do a thermographic, we do many things on the row. But we're looking also for from the point of view of the satellite side. We talk about with many people from the point of view of the fire, from the point of view of the row, and but we are now here on this path in looking to put more cameras on the top of the towers to help us to see where fire starts and helping communities, helping entities to make a better way to help us on this fire. As I said, wildfires is, I would say, the major one problem we have in Portugal. And so that's the path for us to looking for many different things, bringing innovation, yes, and then innovation can be from the satellite way. But now in this way we are looking for more using helicopter, sometimes using drones to help us. We have a project with fixed wings, rotary wings, drones that help us to do something. But I would say most of the power lines we look with helicopter, and sometimes in flexible ways. Suppose we have a storm, suppose we have something happening, and we can use the drone or the rotary or the fixed wings we are implementing now to give us more information, like how many towers are down, and how to look for a fire, how is spreading the fire. I would say there are many things happening now in Portugal on this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Jose. And without further ado, I would invite Federico to give his presentation on from the Terna's perspective and present a methodology for evaluation of grid resilience. So Federico, feel free to share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, hi everybody. I'm sorry not to be there with you in presence. And thanks RGI and ENTSO-E for the opportunity to be here today and talk about a central topic, a challenge for the utilities, for the TSOs, the climate change and the power grid resilience. Thanks also for the opportunity to share the study performed by Terna about the increase of resilience of power system network and the methodology jointly developed with RSI Ricerca Sistema Energetico to calculate the resilience benefit and to support the planning of new grid intervention for resilience. All of us is aware that climate change is now and will be in the future one of the most significant challenges to be addressed globally and locally, as critical infrastructure may be seriously damaged by meteorological extreme weather events related to climate change. The last IPCC report highlighted the direct relationship between increased global warming and change in the climate system. These changes include increase in the frequencies and intensity of heat waves, heavy precipitation, drought, and intense tropical cyclone. The more than 80,000 measured natural events recorded globally by NatCat service Munich since 1980 show how they have tripled in the last 40 years. In Europe, damage from climate hazard impact to critical infrastructure could increase tenfold by the end of the century. Especially in the recent decades, extreme weather events have increasingly affected Italian infrastructure. Analysis of the historical events that in recent years have affected Terna asset highlight heavy snow and tornadoes, wind gusts, but also floods and landslides, so hydrogeological phenomenon. More than 1,700 assets have gone out of service with more than 20 gigawatt hours energy not served. The experience gained in recent years, together with the evolution of the reference scenario and the international scientific view, have highlighted the need to change approach, both in real-time system management and in the planning stage. In particular, switch from a deterministic and frequent methods, mainly based on historical statistical information that might result in losing adequacy and accuracy due to the increase in severity and frequencies of weather events, to a probabilistic and risk-based approach to cope with climate change and strengthen resilience of transmission network. In particular, about snow and ice events, a very frequent phenomenon that cause damage to Terna assets is the wet snow sleeve, a special particular phenomenon that form around 0 Celsius degree and depend on the snow water content and the wind speed. The load of the sleeve, which cylindrically covers conductor and shield wire, or the stresses produced by the wind on the various component of overhead line can result in the lines being out of service if these are higher than the design limits, causing, for example, the breakage of conductors, shield wires, or supports, towers, or they reduce the gap between phase conductor. I mean, the phenomenon of isolation reduction. About snow events, I report the events in Abruzzo, in central Italy in 2015 and 2017, and in the northeast of Italy in 2019 and 2020. About instead the wind gust, as mentioned before, I report the storm Vaya. They at the end of October 2018, with speed until 200 km/h, caused the landslide, floods, collapse of bridge, the disruption of an entire forest, and the loss of 2 interconnection line between Austria and Switzerland, simultaneously triggering 63 high voltage power lines out of service and causing economic losses for billion. This is one, I think, the most catastrophic events happened in the Italy in the last years. This event has led Terna to investigate more in deep the damage to the electricity infrastructure due to several weather events, both for direct and indirect effects. The modeling of indirect effects and the mapping of vegetation at risk of overturning, in particular for the vegetation out of right of wave, out of row, is a crucial aspect for detect and prevent interference. They were carried out by means of LiDAR image processing obtained from aerial overflight of the national transmission grid and based on the Corina land cover database, representative of the land's use and presence and type of vegetation. Starting from 2017, Terna is identifying different type of intervention to increase the resilience of power network included in Terna security plan, in particular for wet snow events. So Terna has implemented the installation of anti-torsional devices and adopt the tools and new procedures for emergency. Regarding the planning stage, Terna focus on answering mainly two important questions. How to consider climate change in resilience analysis and how to be able to assess and quantify the benefit of intervention, considering preventive, mitigation, and restoration intervention, in order to achieve the best trade-off between system resilience and capital expenditures. So from 2020, Terna has defined with RSA the risk-based resilience methodology, a new prospective and probabilistic approach to calculate the benefit for increasing the resilience of the national transmission grid, focusing on wet snow and strong wind. The resilience methodology, after a public consultation, has been approved by ARERA, the Italian regulatory authority. Thanks to the new methodology, Terna has defined the resilience plan set out in the security plan. Resilience plan represents a transversal plan that include all initiatives that Terna carry out to increase the resilience. And now the new resilience plan 2023 is the third edition of the resilience plan. It covers €1 billion of investment in the coming year. Okay. The Terna's risk-based methodology for calculating the increase in power grid resilience is characterized by the following three key elements: prospective climate hazard, asset vulnerability, and contingency analysis considering N-K approach. In particular, innovative, scalable and replicable approach for weather events of different nature that through the development of forecast climate scenarios allows the identification of areas for the territory most exposed to the effect of severe weather events, association with them the relative probability of occurrence. So we obtained a climate hazard map using also the GIS information, the georeferenced asset. We consider our engineering approach for estimating the vulnerability of different components of electric over the line to direct and indirect stresses. We consider each span of the line, but not only span. The analysis is due considering each component of the line, so the conductor, phase conductor, shield wires, supports, foundation. And we use the real and orographic parameters of the line, and considering technical standard, European and Italian standard. Regard the probabilistic and N-K approach for calculating the risk of simultaneously loss of several network elements. The probabilistic and N-K approach allow the evaluation of the simultaneously out of service of several over the line, taking into account the geographical extent and intensity of historical weather events to identify the historical correlation between lines. The modeling of cascading effect followed by the redispatching analysis make the model more realistic and allow Terna to identify the most critical area, and so the substation and after the intervention to be implemented. So in this slide is showed the principal step of the main step of resilience methodology. On the left, we can see the input of the methodology, so the prospective climate maps and the national transmission grid exposure to weather events, and the vulnerability curves. And we can divide the rest of the slide in the top part, where there is the pre-intervention analysis, so analysis performed before the implementation of intervention, so the as-is grid analysis. We calculate the return period for each line, and so the risk index for the overhead line, and the risk index for substation directly connected to the national transmission grid with cascading algorithm. So the return period before intervention and expected energy not supplied for substation. So we identify the critical, the most critical areas and the intervention to be implemented. In the below part, we can see the perform the after intervention analysis. So we calculate the return period after intervention for a line and for substation, obtain then expected energy not supplied after intervention. And finally, we can calculate the benefit, the resilience benefit, considering the difference between expected energy not supplied before and post intervention. So, in conclusion, about the methodology, we consider the risk as a function of threat, vulnerability, contingency, and impact. And finally, we can assess the resilience benefit for the intervention identified. Terna pursues all solutions aimed at increasing the resilience of the electricity system with an optimal mix of investment type, including different technology solution that we can divide it in clustered in four types: preventive measures, that are implemented ex ante regardless of the actual occurrence of failure; mitigation intervention, that are capital light intervention to contain a risk on the electrical system and reduce damage to critical events; restoration measures, that are intervention implemented ex post in response to the actual occurrence of failure; and finally, the monitoring measures, that are innovative technology solution aimed at anticipating critical situation and real-time management. In this slide, I focus on infrastructural solution. In particular, Terna has identified with the application of the mentioned methodology 31 infrastructural interventions with around 500 kilometers lines involved and reducing power outage of 55 substations. When we talk about infrastructural solution, we can consider the overline rebuilding, so reinforce existing assets, improve the mechanical characteristic of assets, so increase the robustness of the asset. The overlaid lines conversion into underground cable, so reduce the exposure to asset to the effect of several weather events. And new line building, so increase the grid redundancy through meshing of the transmission grid. In particular, for this, in this part is important the technology diversification. So mesh the grid not only with over the line, but also with underground cables. In addition to preventive intervention, Terna, I said before, studied also and adapt solution about regard mitigation, restoration, and monitoring. In particular, the installation of anti-torsional devices is a capital light solution this device increase the conductor torsional stiffness, avoiding the rotation that causes the formation of wet snow slabs, or for snow and ice, we adopt a new icephobic paint, and also for snow events or strong wind, the interface space devices. Regarding restoration, the main solution adopted consists in a new emergency plan. In this for this intervention, I refer to the survivability of the system. So guarantee a minimum level of load at for the most critical area. With the use of mobile generator, distributed generation, storage, or operating in Lord Island. But not all, also advanced operation equipment, new fault locator, and other important intervention. At the end, the monitoring intervention, so the use of IoT sensor or new innovative monitoring tools, thanks to the digital transition, able to forecast and alert severe condition in grid operation, and to suggest possible real-time solution aimed at reducing recovery time. For example, the anti-icing current or the icing current using redispatching. So, in conclusion, for Terna, the increase in severity and frequencies of weather events need a change in planning stage, moving from deterministic approach to a new probabilistic risk-based method, considering also prospective climate models and man-scale assessment. A successful implementation of Terna resilience methodology and its application to the develop a resilience plan to increase the resilience of the national transmission grid asset. The application to the national transmission grid demonstrates the capability of the methodology to simulate the effectiveness of different resilience enhancement solution, thus allowing to quantify the associated benefit in terms of grid resilience improvement, and so represent a fundamental step for Terna in the identification of the optimal portfolio of resilience intervention in an output-based perspective. For the moment, for now, the methodology is able to assess the benefit in terms of increasing the resilience of the power system, of investment that increase the robustness of the asset or the network, but does infrastructure and mitigation intervention. But with future development, it will be possible to consider also restoration intervention as well. At the end, I would like to point out the technological innovation and in particular the cooperation between TSO, DSOs, and the cooperation with university and research center that are one of the enable factor to meet the new challenge arising from climate change. In particular, for now we are approaching to consider also hydrogeological phenomenon such as flood and landslide with support of university and RSA, the research center. Thank you very much. I finished.
Thank you very much, Federico, for this comprehensive presentation and sharing some important messages. And yeah, to address some direct questions, I saw hand raised by José, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Federico, for an excellent presentation. Federico, tell me, this kind of plan you have methodology is for how many years do you plan to do this kind of methodology? And then this certainly this was achieved with your regulator.
Allora, yes, the methodology is after a public consultation is agree with the ARERA, the Italian authority, and the resilience plan covers the next 5 years. And in the resilience plan, you can find all the intervention that Terna plan and implement for about the increase the resilience of power grid, and about the methodology. We studied the methodology for 3 years before the consultation and the approval by the authority.
Thank you.
Any other question? Yes, Emmanuel, please.
Yes. Hi, Federico, and thank you for the very interesting presentation. Just a couple of clarifications. We saw that you use some climate maps. How are they produced? Do you cooperate with some organization in your country?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, we cooperate with RSE, Ricerca del Sistema Energetico, Italian research center, and this is for snow events. We saw the wet snow slips, and for wind, in particular for strong wind map, we cooperate with Jupiter, an American company. We use climate models like Eurocordex, and in particular we do the analysis considering RPC 8.5.
Okay, and what is the study horizon? I mean, which are the events? Which is the horizon of the events that you take into account?
2030, 2040, and 2050.
Thank you. And I'm glad to see also as a comment that the methodologies, we see an example of applied methodology, which is very close to what we proposed today and discussed. Thank you.
Yes, Dejana, please.
Thank you for your presentation. And I would ask just for a little bit clarification of the vulnerability curve you present on one of your slides.
Okay, about vulnerability curves. So it is a engineering and analytical approach. We consider the characteristic, the mechanical characteristic of each component of the line. So the phase conductor, shield wires, supports, foundation, to calculate the vulnerability curves. So the probability of out of service of each component, considering the intensity of the weather events. And we consider also in the analysis the standard, the international standard, Italian standard, and so the analysis is performed considering all the direct effect and also the indirect effect. For the indirect effect, I mean the interference of vegetation out of right of wave. So we consider the overturning of vegetation of tree or other plants. We consider also the LIDAR analysis image, and we consider also the orographic, the specific vegetation that can interference with our over the line.
Thank you very much. And I see that Rodrigo raised his hand.
Thanks, Federico, for the presentation. Two small questions. The analysis is made, I suppose, on the full grid, so no reduction of the grid, let's say. And the second one is how the benefit is measured, in sense, do you measure the benefit for each individual action, for a group of actions, or maybe you look at the benefit of the entire plan? Just
Okay.
to
Okay, thank you for the question. First, the analysis is performed considering the whole national transmission grid, and so the entire grid, and the analysis is performed considering the single node of the grid. So we consider all substation or station, all network parameters, electrical parameters of our grid for a load flow calculation, cascading effect, and redispatching. And for the second question, can you repeat, sorry, the second question, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's say, how do you measure the benefits, if it's in terms of single actions that you take, or maybe a group of actions, or if it's measuring the entire plan?
We consider each single intervention. So we perform the analysis before the implementation of the intervention. So in the as-is grid, in the base reference grid, and after we insert in our model the intervention, so a new line, a new cable, or we simulate the increase of robustness of the asset, so the new vulnerability for our asset, and so we performed after the simulation, after the implementation of the intervention, and we consider the variation, the reduction of expected energy not supplied for the substation that we consider in that case.
Thank you.
And I saw also two hands from Jose and Pauline. So please go.
Well, my question, Federico, when you said about failure from the technical view, when you make a project, we see a project for one case, suppose ice, and then you make another view about wind. Do you conjugate this kind of events on the same time or not? Only a single event each way?
Okay. This is an interesting question, because for the two events that we already considered, that we are considering for now, the wet snow sleeves and the wind, the strong wind, this is a true phenomenon that not occur together. So if we have a wet snow sleeve, we don't have a strong wind. So we considered the single benefit related to increase resilience about wet snow sleeve and strong wind, but we consider the both benefits. So we performed analysis considering the increased resilience about wet snow and strong wind. So we obtained two resilience benefit, one related to snow and one related to strong wind. So for example, intervention, a new cable might have a potential benefit also for snow and for wind, because it's a new cable that is a resilience for the two phenomenon.
Thank you.
And Pauline?
Yes, thank you very much. So my question would be for both Rennes and Terna, because part of your network is also composed of interconnections with the neighboring countries. So I was wondering if you had some cooperation with the country with which you are interconnected, or are you only doing this resilience assessment and implementation plans only for national purpose, or do you plan at least to cooperate more with the other TSOs?
Yeah, for today, I focus my speech about planning stage. So I present this methodology for evaluate resilience benefit of new intervention, in particular infrastructure intervention. Is regard operation. Operation stage, instead in a real-time operation is important also the cooperation with neighbor TSO. So the interconnection that is a important investment to increase also the resilience. But this analysis, the vulnerability assessment is made for Italian transmission grid.
Well, from the point of view of Portugal, yes, we talk with Spain, but from like Terna, this events is, I would say, we look inside these events that we have had. Was not in the interconnections. If we were in an interconnection, maybe we would talk, but we talk a lot with Spain and other TSOs, because there are many funds like this one, but we have also SIGRE. When we talk about to make a media representation, we talk about these aspects. They are truly important for all of us.
Thank you very much. And I don't see any raised hands. So for your information, according to agenda, first of all, thank you for these presentations and the discussions. There are still some points in the agenda that we would like to realize today. And we know that we are behind the schedule, but we are having very interesting discussion collecting the inputs. But having some background discussions, we decided to start now with the lunch break to fuel ourselves a bit, and then we will proceed with the next the points of the agenda after the break. So we will come back and to the discussions 2:15. So thank you very much for now, and see you in around 50 minutes.
I was basically asked to just sort of switch sides and give a bit more of a practical short overview of what actually is happening in terms of taking risk understanding into resilience. And what I'm saying is used sort of mostly framed from a risk perspective, financial risk perspective, should I say. So I'll just give you a few examples, and I think some of that might be relevant because there are some sectors where this analysis and, sort of doing adaptation has also been, well, it has a slightly longer track record. So I hope to share some insights on that. And just to begin with, I know sometimes we struggle with the name of the company. So I work with Marsh McLennan, which is a big group. It's a global group, and we have 4 companies, and they're all sort of built around risk, insurance, investment, and also consultancy work. And I sit at the group level, and I coordinate sort of climate strategy. And energy is one focus area, and we work across the world with various players in the energy system. This is an example of where we bring in sort of understanding and knowledge around physical risk, but also transition risk, and then come up with some analysis. And I think the perspective that we have developed in the firm and across the 4 firms is really this view that resilience, at the end of the day, it's a whole of society approach. I mean, there are so many interdependencies and there are so many different actors who are playing a part. And I think this is really important, regardless of whether you're a regulator or you're a company or you're an insurer or an investor, to recognize that, resilience is very interdependent, and often it's not a question of someone taking one particular action. It can work. If you're lucky, then that solves some problems. But I think in general, resilience is really something that cuts across. And, it's easy to say whole of society. We can discuss this, but I think there were a couple of references here to this today. And I think that's just important as a starting point. So I just wanted to give you some insights on what, in the context of resilience, what we do when we work with different sectors, also with regulators, with governments. And there's this frame that we have like a resilience playbook. And I'll just give you a couple of brief illustrations of how the analysis and the assessment looks like. So usually the starting point, not a big surprise, is an understanding of current and future risk. And we have seen this throughout today, that's where you start. Well, if you're doing it well, you're looking at different scenarios, you have an understanding of the underlying science, and then you also need obviously data on the exposure, the assets, the systems, and also on the vulnerability. And really, that is the starting point. Without that, you can't really do much. And here's an example of how you actually do that. And I mean, I'm not going to talk you through the different steps there, and they're just quite detailed. But I think the key message there is, these kinds of assessments, they shouldn't be like a black box exercise that you outsource and give someone and hope to get a response, get a number, or get the top 3 things you should do. I think it really needs to be internalized, and if you're a company or if you're the regulator or if you're government, you kind of need to own the analysis. And there's a lot of support that you can get from the outside and help and developing these strategies. But at the end of the day, you also need to understand where the limitations are and where, for example, the climate scenarios, how to read them and what the issues could be with some of them. So I mean that's but that's also not new, and it works and people are doing it. So it just requires quite a few steps. And I think particularly around financial disclosure, we've seen a massive transformation because a lot of companies have to do this and they have to report this, and they do this. And here's another explanation of how you then, in this case, around flooding, how you kind of work all your way from, understanding, in this case, it's an asset, understanding is all the way to determine loss estimates under different scenarios. So that is actually fairly established and not very, very difficult if you have the data and if you basically have also the manpower to do this. But I think why it becomes interesting is then to understand, well, what could be the financial impacts and what type of financial impacts are relevant. And I think, there is, the starting point is usually to look at, operational expenses and assess that. But, obviously there are questions then around productivity losses, capital expenses, and insurance costs. And it really sort of, if you need to understand, what the impact of an extreme event is or a gradual change, you really have to to look at these more broadly than just say, okay, well, there was damage to one asset and it cost me, X million to repair it. Now, what are the secondary impacts? How does this actually, transition through or cascade through your system? And that's why it's so important to actually start reflecting on different financial impacts. And that is then the starting point of, coming up with some prioritization, but also then identifying the different response options. And again, I mean, we've heard a lot of, we've seen reference to that. We have seen that in action. But I think the key point here is that you also need to think, think a little bit outside the box and also try and be considering the co-benefits. So, if you do certain things, I mean, a very popular example at the moment is, can we use nature to reduce risk? So this idea that you have nature-based solutions that you can use, and it creates a lot of co-benefits. And wouldn't it be great if we can make assets and systems more resilient by using nature? And I think that is a very valid approach, but obviously there are also some costs and some risks attached to that. And we're just starting to unpack that and understand that. And often the level of trust in these new solutions isn't also very high. So again, there's work needed and new research and also new evidence needed to actually address some of these. And then what you can do is, once you've kind of identified them, you can look again at sort of event probability based on your previous analysis, and kind of work through what actually makes sense over what time frame and at what point in time you actually would need to start making this investment. And here you can see, this is just like a standardized example, but it's a process to come up with these numbers. There's also a lot of expert judgment. I mean, some of that is not just a matter of looking at a number. It requires also a lot of discussion with those involved, often those closest to a particular asset or those who monitor the system. They're the ones who can also need to be involved in this. And this comes back to my initial point. I would recommend, don't trust anybody who just gives you the numbers or just gives you the result. No, you kind of need to own the result, and you need to also understand it. And that's just the continuation there. And then I think, at the core of this are sort of what we call sort of three principles, I guess. And, they all sound very obvious and straightforward, but, implementing them and utilizing them when we make business decisions is far from standard and far from obvious. So, the first one is, forward-looking trends. I mean, we're talking about climate here a lot, but, a lot of our decision-making is still very much geared on experience. Yeah. The next one is also to look through tools, how these tools can be implemented, and new models of participation, thinking back of this whole of society approach, which is also not common, and people might just want to do their own thing. But if you really want to address resilience, you have no choice. You have to think through the system. And then I think the last point is this co-benefit point, which, sometimes if you're a hardcore economist, you think, well, co-benefit is just like a big open door to throw everything in if you want to make something look more attractive. I think by now we have much better ways of assessing it, and there are some very robust assessments that show that if you do something, the incentive should not just be that you reduce losses, but you can create a lot of other economic, environmental, but also social benefits. And I think that kind of really strengthened then the investment case. So that's just kind of like a quick tour or summary of some of the approaches that we take, where we work with different sectors and with government to actually switch our decision making towards a more sort of resilient focused decision making. And with that, I'll leave.
Thank you very much, Svenja, for this presentation. And are there any immediate questions or remarks from the participants? I don't see any, and also from the participants joining online. So I think that everything was very clear.
Well, people are still very tired.
Yeah, but there's
Thank you for your presentation. This company Mark McKenna is an insurance company?
We are not an insurer. We are an insurance broker. So we arrange insurance for clients and help them to find insurance. We work with the insurers, but also with companies. So we're not underwriting risks.
So they are looking for more information because insurance companies are looking for these kind of problems because and so they are this kind of aspects is it's not new for them. They are.
No, I mean, I just give you an example of what we do. So it can be a company, it's a large company, it can be a utility, it can be, manufacturer, and they need to have insurance. So their insurer want to know as much as they can about all sorts of risks. So we would usually prepare that. And part of that is then also, insurers starting questions about what have you considered, making resilience decisions. So often this is already part of the conversation. I think climate sort of comes into this now. It's a new thing because your insurance is only there for 12 months. So, for the next 12 months, you're covered. But I think there the question is, what can you do also to have a more longer term approach to this? And insurers are starting to engage with their clients to see how they can support them, whether there are some incentives. So I think that's one lens. And the other lens is investment. So if you're a big investor, a lot of investors are now start asking questions about risk and about resilient systems. So that's becoming a standard now.
That's becoming.
It's becoming. I mean, they might ask for it. Whether they use the information is another question. But the disclosure, and people also have to disclose this because regulators ask them to do that. So, and I think from next year onwards, pretty much every company in Europe, it will be covered by the corporate sustainable disclosure regime. And that will include disclosure on adaptation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? I don't see any. Okay. And so thank you very much, Svenja, for your presentation. And now we will move to a session where we would like to discuss with you the definition on climate adaptation and resilience measures. This is something that we contacted you in advance of this workshop. Thank you very much for the feedback delivered. And I will give floor now to Niels, who is going to guide us and present the results and invite to the discussion. So Niels, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So I hope you all had enjoyed a good meal at ENTSO-E, and my experience is always good, but unfortunately today I cannot be there. What I would like to give you now is an overview about the definitions that we have so far. So that doesn't mean that this is already set in stone. It's still under discussion, and we should discuss further on today. As earlier mentioned, we had already sent around and received feedback about these discussions, definitions, but this does not hinder us to discuss further on and amend these, what you see on the slide right now. So basically the first bullet is what is given in the regulation. it's basically, yeah, just a citation of what is given in the regulation. I think we have already seen this. So climate adaptation means a process that ensures that resilience to the potential adverse impact of climate change of energy infrastructure is achieved through a climate vulnerability and risk assessment, including through adaptation measures. So basically, that's the background about this, but there's of course more information in the regulation itself and also in the guidelines that we have so far. And what we can agree on now is the next two bullets, which were already the outcome of the feedback that we have received. And I don't know how we could do this the best way, because maybe I can give you a little bit of time to reading through this, and then I will or let's go for the next slide first, and then I give you time to read. Because here we have an overview about the comments that we have received so far. So these are the comments we have received on the definitions that we have considered in some way. If it's the proper way, we also need to get your feedback. And on the next slide, we have the information which we have not considered, because I think also this is the best way to start here, because most of this information or questions, basically it was questions, were not directly related to the definition of the given indicators. So basically what you see here is general questions that will be answered somewhere else. So for example, the first question is how the CBA framework ensures that the value of additional interconnection assets is estimated. So this is or explanation that is given in the CBA guideline itself. And also the next one, basically all of the comments that we have not considered in the definition is based on stuff that is not going directly into this definitions. So I can leave this open here for a moment if there's someone who would like to address something, but I think it's okay to not considering what you see here on the slide in the definition section. So basically, if anyone realized that this comment was from him or her, then please note if this is okay or.
I see the comment from raised hand by Catherine.
Thank you very much. Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, of course I will.
You will. Thank you.
But I just wanted to close this one first, if there's any comments on this.
Yeah, I have a question that's also relating to what Emmanuel has presented before. So I see you said to exclude storage and flexibility expansion. And in the first common definition draft you sent, it was including transmission system elements. And this is what was presented in ESO's draft of methodology. And I'm wondering why, and why did you decide to change to energy system elements? I think you've put in the definition now, and because in the context of the CBA, we're talking about PCI, which are not only transmission system elements. So could you give a bit of clarification on
that? May I ask maybe Frank to support on this question?
Yes, sure. Sure, Niels. So yes, maybe I need to read through it again. But for these specific feedback were not considered, we were also looking into the framework of the TYNDP itself. So some of those considerations, for instance, I'm thinking about flexibility then and storage. These are considered in other aspects of the CBA methodology itself. Okay, we can read through this again and see together if this could be also implemented into this discussion of climate adaptation itself. Because basically, yes, at first we were talking about electricity transmission, but rightfully pointed out by Catherine Prince from the Commission, we should not limit it only to electricity system. I mean, from ENTSO-E perspective, we are analyzing, of course, electricity transmission projects, but we are moving towards more interlinked model also, you see. So yes, the point here was to see the impact of our electricity project into the system, which is interlinked itself. And I felt like, yes, this specific feedback on storage was already tackled by other topics in the CBA guideline. And for others, like cybersecurity, for instance, and data protection, public awareness and education, integration of distributed energy resources and end users, active end users. Yes, for me, these are so granular information just to be considered, and maybe too much information. But I don't know. This, of course, I happy to have any kind of feedback. But for me, I consider this as too many information to be considered in the framework of our CBA methodology and ENTSO-E. But happy, of course, to have any feedback on this. Thank you, Leo.
I have another question, which is, could you give clarification on what do you expect to be in the definition and what belongs to methodology, what's belong to the definition, what's belong to the overall guideline? Because yeah, I have many questions on what I discussed with Naya before, so on the sort of time frame or like horizon of assessment when you ask for a measure, like on which time frame should it be assessed on. And I suggested this in the common definition, but I understood that, okay, that's too detailed. So that means that belongs to the methodology, but how do you draw a line between what's in the definition and what's in the...
Yeah, I don't
know. The point of the definition is to define what we are dealing with, not to going and the scope we will dealing with in our methodology. And I think that we will take that into consideration. We will define all necessary details in our implementation guidelines, but not right now to put it in the definition part.
Thank you. Any other questions to the slide shared by Niels? So what have been excluded and why? I don't see any. So Niels, I think that maybe you can move to the others.
So yeah, that was the other slide, and we had a question on this or a comment on that. Please, could you proceed with this one?
Yes, my question was first because there is a lot of work from social sciences on resilience, and that several here are familiar with. To which extent you build on that knowledge and definitions, and that if we go back to the previous slide, please.
This one or
this one? Yeah. Where you have a draft definition. So that's the first thing. That's how do you reflect, or to which extent do you want to reflect the understanding of resilience from other, from established work into these definitions. And that's also related to the previous question as what is the role of the definition related to other processes. Keep it general as much as possible, or be precise because it will be guiding for other processes. And the second one is it's pretty clear that you distinguish climate adaptation from climate resilience, but we have other aspects of resilience is even bigger in the context of the ecological transition. So this, and it was mentioned already this morning that we already have a definition or in the CBA around climate adaptation, but not yet on climate resilience. That's what was you presented. So I was curious to have your views how close actually these definitions are. Thank you.
I don't know if Frank or Diana could reply on this one, because in general, I think we need to define what is a definition. because I see that we are mixing up things here.
Maybe-
To me, the definition is just defining of what we are talking about, and anything else is not the definition any longer, but just already the application. So currently we are defining, or that was the proposed idea from the drafting team CBA from ENTSO-E side, is that we are defining climate adaptation measures. What do we understand as climate adaptation? And the second one is, what do we understand as climate resilience? And here we are just defining what we are talking about, and then in the next step, we should discuss about how we are applying this and monetizing, for example, this, or measuring this, and what models we are using to get these information out. I think that's basically the main idea from my side. I don't know if this is answering or helping a little bit in the question. Otherwise, I would like to ask Frank or Diana.
I would just complete my question. Is because these concepts are very clear understanding in at least in certain field of research, that we should be very careful how they are referred to in the definition. That adaptation and resilience are two different things, and therefore two different definitions. So just to, maybe we need an explanation for the definition. Just maybe.
So to me, as you see on the slide, to me, these are two different things, the climate adaptation and the resilience. So therefore, we have proposed two different definitions. But if that is not the proper way of displaying this, then we can discuss about this. But I find it reasonable, at least also in perspective of how to assess this then in the CBA framework in the TYNDP. Because we also need to think about what we are doing here today is not a very general thing to be applied everywhere around the world. It is with a focus of applying it for the CBA assessment in the TYNDP itself. So it's for the CBA guideline and the implementation guidelines. And for this, as I've shown it also earlier this morning, we have already started to use this two-step approach, first starting with the climate adaptation. And out of the climate adaptation, of course, comes the resilience, because any measure that you apply based on this will also increase the resilience, or most probably will increase the resilience. So first question then, direct question to the audience in general is this separation from adaptation and resilience, is this okay for you to be as a definition, to be defined in the CBA guideline itself?
Yes, José?
I should say from me it's the same thing, but it's difficult to understand. Adaptation is an action, like you said, and resilience, I would say, more a characteristic of the asset. If I look to the asset, but it's difficult to say if there are different things, or should they be always together? I don't really know.
So yeah, but that is a crucial point. Maybe that helps in understanding this. Adaptation is a concrete action, and the result of this action then is the resilience, or could turn out into the resilience.
Yeah, Catherine, please.
Yeah, I will personally support having a distinction between the two. So I support your proposal to distinguish adaptation, that is indeed one specific action, and resilience, that is more on the building a resilience capacity and transformation, ability to react and to rebound. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that from the audience? Maybe for participants joining online? No. So I think that there's agreement that both terms should be then divided and treated separately. So I think that this is clear. And any other?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would like to leave this definitions now to give you the chance to read through if you have not yet done this, and would like to ask for comments, concrete comments on that. I think that is giving you now the possibility to directly comment on this would be the way that we can achieve here. I think we cannot work out every and any detail of these, but if there is anything that you would like to comment on right now, please feel free to give us the feedback.
Yes, Elko, please go ahead.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like nitpicking indeed, but just when I read this first definition, achieved through climate vulnerability and risk assessment, I don't necessarily think you achieve resilience or through vulnerability and risk. Well, we're already getting the resilience out of it, but yeah, adaptation is also not really achieved through a vulnerability and risk assessment, but we just use a vulnerability and risk assessment to try to identify what would be the best adaptation measure, right? But we don't really, yeah, it doesn't really achieve it. It's just a measure to identify the best adaptation strategy or measure.
Yeah, one comment on that. This is from the 10E regulation, so this is not for discussion for today. That was just for information because this is in the regulation. Please focus on the second and the third bullet.
Yeah, but we can share this comment with the Commission. So
yeah.
Next term of revision of the new regulation. But Lea, you had a comment?
Yeah, I jumped into the resilience definition, I guess. And a question I had earlier also is the choice of term security of supply. I don't work for TSOs, but I know it's always been a dramatic discussion where we want to differentiate security of supply and resilience. And I was wondering why not considering maybe the IEEE definition that makes a clear definition saying we don't talk about security of supply when we talk about high impact, low probability event. Security of supply is N-1, N-2, and N-K with big K is resilience. So I don't know if anyone is aware of this discussion, but.
Yeah, I don't know if Niels wants to take it. First, I was not aware necessarily of the discussion, but yeah, here in the context of the CBA methodology itself, we very often use those security of supply. I mean, what we call security of supply, then, to kind of assess the how to say it. So we use the security of supply to kind of see basically the impact of a project in critical situations in the grid, basically. So these are done also through assessment in N-. I'm mixing things right now. So yeah, these are done basically by putting the grid into some critical situations. Okay, and see. How critical? How critical? That's another question. But typically, I think this goes very, very well into. I would say, all in all, this goes very well into what Manuel was proposing also in his. I mean, at least this is how I view it. I don't know if Niels or maybe someone else wants to comment on that. But yes, talking about maybe this potential energy not served, for instance, for me is an indicator of the security of supply, So for me, this makes complete sense on that end, at least. And I know that, for instance, yeah, in the feedback, we had received comments about, I don't know, hospitals being not served in terms of energy. This would bring some costs, but this is also energy not served, I guess. Yeah, which, I mean, for security of supply, I was trying to go, let's say, very broad and not limited in this aspect of losing, for instance, of improved resilience. But it seems like yeah, I don't know if you want to say something.
There's Rodrigo wants to respond to that.
Actually, not necessarily a response, but still in the topic. when we write security of supply, or even if we find another term, we're referring, let's say, we're referring to the ENS. That's kind of the direction where we're going. And then sort of the open question is, do we look only at this perspective, or bringing the comment from Andrea from earlier today, should we also look into the economic aspect? Let's say maybe an event would not lead to a loss of supply, but if you had the climate adaptation measures, you could sustain that event at a much lower operational cost. So I'm just trying to bring up the question again, so that if we go in a direction, we're happy to go in that direction, but knowing that we are going in that direction. So do we really focus on the energy not supplied aspect, or do we broaden a little bit and look at how the climate adaptation can also help minimize cost, even if you don't have loss of supply?
Provide an example, because can you provide an example about the second case, because I cannot think of something concrete about it.
So let's say country A and country B, you have normally an NTC of 1,000. During a climate event, that NTC is reduced to 800. You don't have loss of load, but it's going to cost you a lot more than if you had the climate adaptation and the NTC, instead of being reduced to 800, was reduced only to 900, for example. So you don't have a loss of load, but you still have an economic, you still potentially have an economic benefit of introducing that climate adaptation. I don't know, Andrea, if that's what you meant.
Yeah, no, correct. But it could also be within a single country. Like, for example, maybe you have some constraint between the north and the south. For example, in Germany, you have a lot of wind in the north of the country. A lot of the demand is in the south. What happens if you have a line, maybe, I don't know, there is like a technical problem, there is like an outage on the transmission line, so the power cannot flow. And then you have much higher prices on the imbalance market, for example. That will increase a lot the cost for consumers. So for me, adaptation is not just about blackouts. I mean, blackouts or non-serve energy is really the extreme scenario, the one that we really need to avoid. But it's also about making sure that we don't have the electricity spikes that we saw last year. And in a system with 70, 80, 90% renewables, maybe in 10, 20 years, I could see that the electricity system will become more and more volatile. Yeah. So we need to make sure that there is resilience in the way also delivering the electricity and at affordable price for consumers, basically. Yeah.
Well, I would say that within the framework of the CBA, though, this is a bit theoretical expansion of the definition. We agree that all these consequences are very important, but here we are trying to find a definition about the CBA context, and then considering the impacts on the imbalance markets and so on. It's going to be theoretical because they will not be put in place, I guess.
But isn't this part of the net welfare? Like, I saw that one of the criteria is net welfare. So you look at how the project impact the system. That looks at prices as well, no? Like total cost of delivery. So yeah, I think it should. I mean, if I understood correctly, the criteria, it should be included actually in the assessment.
Okay, then maybe that's definitely an approach, and then maybe you can assess the resilience also by calculating an extra socioeconomic welfare brought by the project.
And that was the direction of the question, if we should include that or if we stick to the energy not serve aspect. And just so that whatever direction we go, we're all sort of in agreement that.
I think my approach is always to be more pragmatic and try to start from something and then expand to more ambitious targets. that would be nice to have, but I think it's on ENTSO-E to answer whether you will be able to run such simulations, or all the TSOs to run such simulations and approximate all these aspects.
But can I ask a clarification here? Because I saw before in the table of the criterias, the net welfare was the first one, right? That I saw on the top. So doesn't the net welfare consider the benefit also from an economic point of view that an interconnector will bring to the whole system at the European level? So we have cheap power coming from, for example, another country. Will not that be quite significant?
Indeed, but then you're entering in a second question, which can be difficult to grasp. But when we're looking at climate adaptation and system resilience, are we looking at how projects in general benefit the system in terms of resilience? Or are we looking at how making one piece of asset improve the system in terms of resilience? So it's two very similar things when we say, but in terms of the implementation, they are very, very different. So naturally, just with the normal CBA, when you compare having the project with not having the project, we will see the socioeconomic welfare, and then in some way you see this improvement in resilience. But if we focus on the making one piece of asset more resilient and how that brings benefits to the system, it's a slightly different simulation. It's not a simulation of with or without the project. It's with the project but no climate adaptation, with the project and climate adaptation. So the actual implementation in the model happens in a different stage, and it can be quite difficult to grasp what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm expressing myself well.
What you're trying to say is, for example, we could have a project like an interconnector which is 90% reliable on available to deliver versus one which is like 97% reliable because there was some extra climate adaptation. So maybe more expensive from a climate capex perspective, but more reliable. Is that what you were saying? Or?
Indeed, yeah.
Thanks. And so before that, Lea, you also had your hand up.
Still have many questions.
Go for it.
Well, on the question of discussing asset resilience versus system resilience, I guess the question is ENTSO-E able or has idea on how to assess the resilience of the system, whether without adding the project or not. Just, I guess if you want to build a methodology to consider the resilience, you will be able to assess it.
Yeah, it certainly needs thinking, so please don't take what I'm saying as something definite. But what comes to my mind, if we want to look at the entire system, we could look just at the fact that you add the project. This already can increase resilience to the whole system. So by adding an interconnection between a country which is hydro-based with another country which is more thermal-based, that already brings more resilience to the overall system. If it's dry, you use from the other. If it's wet, then this one. So this is one thing. The other thing is the example that I tried to give with an interconnection that normally is 1,000. Then on outages, this would be reduced to 800, for example. But if you have a climate adaptation measure for the extreme events, maybe you don't reduce it to 800, you reduce it to 900. So as long as we could get something like this from the project promoters on what, let's say, what kind of extra resilience the asset brings in terms of capacity being provided to the system, then we can do the assessment. Yeah, it's just thinking out loud.
I have another question actually on the criteria, because again, going back to that slide, there are many criteria, right? I don't think I found in the document the way those criteria are accounted for, like in the sense, okay, many of these are monetized criteria, so it's easy to compare against each other. But how do you then rank them? Let's say, is there a specific weight that you apply for the qualitative one, for example? Like how do you compare two projects when there are some differences between the different criteria, let's say? Is there like a specific approach, or?
That's basically the general idea behind our CBA guideline, that we're having multi-criteria approach, which means that we have different criteria and we are not ranking the projects against each other. That was always the philosophy of ENTSO-E. We are giving the benefit per project for the European system, and that's expressed then in different indicators. And we are giving here additional information, like some of them are monetized. So like, for example, socioeconomic welfare, of course, is monetized. And also we are monetizing the CO2 benefit, because we are giving the CO2 in tons, of course. And we are giving also the additional societal benefit that comes from the CO2, that CO2 gives as a damage to the society and stuff like that. So this is also monetized, and losses are also monetized benefits. So these can sum up together to basically one monetization indicator, but the rest of the indicators we would like to leave, like res integration. This is not monetized, but can give an additional information to the whole project assessment. And in the end, we have a bunch of indicators that are all relevant, as we see, but not all of them are reasonably to be monetized. So therefore, we have decided to keep this multi-criteria approach. But in order to give the full picture, we are having these additional information then.
Yes, Elko?
Yeah, maybe one brief question about this multi-criteria approach. So just to make it clear, so you weigh everything equally? Because generally, indeed, with a multi-criteria analysis, you attach weights to it. That's the depth.
As we don't weight anything, I would say yes.
Okay, sure. All right. Yeah, that's fine.
So basically, I know that in some countries, some indicators are weighted more than others. And that is why we at ENTSO-E level, for the European perspective, we are don't making any weighting of the indicators. We are just giving them.
That's something what is in decision makers' hands. We just offer the tool and calculations, and decision maker decides what of these benefits can get the higher priority in their decision.
From what I know from my colleagues this morning, there was actually Mathieu here that works at the Director General C4. So he actually follow project of common interest and project of mutual interest. So he actually received the analysis from ENTSO-E. But one difficulty challenge that we are having right now, the Commission at least, is that not necessarily the process is always very transparent from ENTSO-E. So the Commission is trying to develop its own, let's say, internal way of also getting a sense of the benefits and cons of the project. So I think there is definitely a willingness to make this process a bit more transparent, so that the Commission also, and not just the Commission, but also in general, citizens, right, are more aware of all the different criteria, how they are assessed, so that there is full transparency behind each project, basically. Because this is the part we are finding a bit difficult right now.
And what do you find as a lack of transparency is at the ENTSO-E side?
I mean, now I don't. I cannot reply, but from the little I know is that there is a willingness to make the process be more transparent, so that also the Commission is able to investigate a bit more how these analyses are performed. Because of course there is a high level of trust between the two institutions, but more cooperation, I think they are positive for everyone.
So I know about this transparency requirement and desire from the Commission and also other stakeholders, and I think that the CBA guideline as it is, I would call it transparent, because everything is written down there. So this is the methodologies that are applied. I think the main improvement that we can make at ENTSO-E level, but I don't know how this will turn out in the future and if this is possible, but it would be on the modeling itself, how the models are used, what models are used, what are the data and stuff like that. So this is, I think, going into the direction to answer this question about the transparency. But for the CBA and the implementation, I would say we are quite transparent or already, but if there's some concrete things, then we are willing to hear that, because that's always something that ENTSO-E would like to be very transparent. That's one of our goals as well.
Okay, thank you very much for this discussion. Any other points? I see Pauline raised her hand, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to come back on what Rodrigo just said a few minutes ago, because I'm not sure I understood if we answered the challenge or not. Like, for me, it's not very clear what question we want to answer with all this exercise within the CBA analysis. Do we want in the end to choose PCIs and project of mutual interest that giving more value to the project that are more adapted or fit for a world in which there would be more meteorological hazards and so on? Or do we want to show in the study where the redundancies for the system would be more located or more valuable? Because depending on what question we want to answer, for me, the definition will change. And I know this is exactly what you wanted to tackle, Rodrigo, but I'm not sure we answer this question.
Yeah, Rodrigo or Niels, or you want to?
I can provide some reply. I think for the regulators, the purpose of the TYNDP, because the CBA is used for the TYNDP, is not simply to select PCIs. It's just a small fraction of the purpose of the TYNDP. The TYNDP has multiple purposes. One is to provide the European consolidated approach of the planning of the system. A very important target is to exchange information and data from between all countries, which is very important for the planning. And the third, to have coordination alongside Europe. So PCIs is not the core of the TYNDP. So we should depart from this target and not think of the PCIs all the time. And also to mention here that resilience is mentioned in the regulation 943 and not only 869, the 10E regulation regarding the PCI selection. So, and according to regulation, the electricity regulation 943, the TYNDP should examine the resilience of the system. So this also sets the legal framework of what should be in the TYNDP.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, remarks regarding the definition itself? Yes, Emmanuel, please go ahead.
Me again. I don't understand why in the definition of resilience, I understand, so the third paragraph or bullet, there is a reference to sustainability in the system. So therefore, resilience measures are all the measures that can help improve the security supply and sustainability. why sustainability is part of resilience.
Well, maybe I can reply to that because that was part of my feedback. So basically, what was also showed, especially in José's presentation, about how different adaptation and resilience measures can be conceptualized in a way that you are dealing with environment that is around infrastructure, and this is also the work that we are doing at RGI. So, and what Svenja mentioned about the nature-based solution, or kind of trying to bring together the infrastructure, enhancing infrastructure and nature. So that there are ways to to come up with the measures that are nature-based, and maybe to come up with the value that could feed into the methodology. That could be the approach.
Okay, then I think the phrasing should be slightly different. So not measures that help improve security supply and sustainability, but help improve the security supply while improving also sustainability, or
while achieving European climate goals could be.
Or nature restoration targets, because this is yeah.
You know, because in the framework of the CBA and well, ENTSO-E's task, sustainability has to do with renewables and installing new renewable capacity. So it can have many different meanings.
Yeah, of course.
So I would ask, maybe it's not the right time to find the right phrasing, but reflect this concern, but in a way that is more. It's not. It cannot be misunderstood. Let's say.
Point taken. Thank you. And Rodrigo?
Should we include affordability as well? And that would leave the door open, not necessarily to be done now, but leave the door open for looking at the economic aspects.
Okay. I can support it because this is what I also sent in my feedback, but it was removed. But maybe Emmanuel, you.
But we haven't discussed this. I think within our groups and teams. But I would be open personally. I find it reasonable and within the scope. But it's only a matter of capacity of ENTSO-E to perform such analysis. Because we presented before some time ago this methodology to consider the security supply, which is already not easy to do. So if you add other aspects that you will need to do, pan-European modeling, studying these extreme events, I think it's quite complicated. But on the other hand, if you have a few projects, maybe it's possible to be done. But as a definition, it can be wide, and then in the coming TYNDPs, you have a more focused approach, and then in the end, in the coming years, you expand if it's possible.
Yeah, not to keep it as a kind of obligatory aspect, but leaving doors open as a part of the inclusive understanding what could be the measures. And Lea?
Yeah, sorry to come back on what we discussed before, but then if the plan is to leave the doors open and we have a generic definition, then I would suggest to remove security of supply, because we don't want to close door to ENS as a single factor of assessment resilience, and say we're limiting vulnerability to extreme weather events or something like that. And then it's door open to how you're gonna assess it later, outside the definition.
But it sounds like we're going back to the energy trilemma here, no? You need security of supply, affordability, and we need renewables, so decarbonization. I think security of supply is also quite important, considering also the new geopolitical challenges that we are having. Energy might come from other continents as well, perhaps, Central Asia, Africa, or, from, well, for example, we were also importing electricity from Russia until 2 years ago, like Finland, Ukraine. Also, some countries were highly exposed. So we see how security of supply is quite important. I don't know if this was in the past, how was this was accounted, this risk.
This is diversification.
Yeah. So
yeah, security of supply has many aspects, I think.
Yeah.
Me personally, I think okay, it's fine if we expand the definition a bit, but expand up to a point that makes sense, and it's not as generic, so generic that actually can fit.
The suggestion was actually to narrow it down to extreme weather events, as it's part of many definitions of climate resilience in the academia. I agree with everything that's been said now, but I suggest to narrow it down to this definition. Because that's what we've been talking about all day, is like resilience measures, whether it's redundancy, making the brig bigger, smarter, operated better towards windstorm. But
yeah, I think that we can take this point and then for further consideration, and this also what the feedback that will be taken by ENTSO-E. And I saw that Catherine raised her hand.
Yes, in our work on resilience, and we focused also on energy infrastructures and grid resilience, we have been looking at both the existing definitions in other legal systems. And for example, under US law, you have pretty clear definitions of resilience in the context of grid infrastructure. So I would advise to have a look as well how they have been defining it. Just as a matter of example. And the second is I tend to agree that we need to know where does this definition fit, and be careful because definitions have a tendency to be just to be copy-paste. So again, maybe an explanation of the definition would be good, just to situate the definition, the link, close link to the CBA. And if you link into CBA, you can narrow down. And security of it's not only security of supply, and you have other mechanisms related to adequacy, resource adequacy, reliability, operational flexibility that have very precise meaning. And resilience is broader. But again, we're using resilience here in the context of CBA related to infrastructure, energy system, non-one. So that needs to be clarified, I think. Yeah. Thank
you. Diana?
Of course, there are a lot of aspects we have to take in consideration, but security of supply is the primary pillar of our interests. That's why, in the first step, we are focused at the security of supply.
Maybe to move forward and not to stack, I suggest just to take these points. Also, I see that Frank is taking the notes, so there will be some homework to do, and then we can have follow-up discussions on these specific topics. And maybe at this point, if there are no any, there is one important aspect by Emmanuel.
Sorry, yeah, I think it's the last one. It's the last phrase, the last sentence of this bullet. So in terms of the CBA framework, climate resilience measures have to be taken as quantitative indication. Why? Again, limited. When we can monetize by having a value of gross load if we calculate energy non-served. I mean, I think this is not necessary. We can take it out, and in the implementation guideline, you determine whether it is quantitative or monetized.
I think that can be clarified easily because I put this in, and to me, quantification or monetization is a part of quantification. So because you have numbers, and anything that comes in numbers is a quantification. So therefore, this monetization is included in this, but we can mention this explicitly as well.
Yeah, leave it out.
Okay, so I think that there's no any red flags or very urgent points to address. Also looking on the time, the limitations, and Niels, Frank, Rodrigo question and Diana question to you, like whether this input is already for the definition itself sufficient one to work further and
Of course, yes. We will, of course, get back maybe to the discussion by email or stuff like that. So we are willing to receive any additional information. But in principle, we are already having this additional information because we were relating just on the security of supply here and on sustainability. But this financial part is also a part that we can consider, as Rodrigo also mentioned earlier. So that's already valid information that we got from this discussion out here. And maybe also thinking about the definition. But the important thing also to me is what has mentioned also earlier, that we are focusing here on the definition for the CBA guideline itself and not a general worldwide definition.
Okay, thanks a lot, Nils, and also you already touched upon, and we with this collective exercise to discuss the definition, so many input that could be then integrated, but opening a different point of discussion and considering the input presentations and some conversations that we have throughout the day, what would be other ideas or takeaways that we talked about today that could be then integrated into the CBA guidelines. So not focusing only on the definition, but taking from presentation of Svenja, Jose, Federico, and the others. Frank, you.
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't know if maybe Nils wants to say something, or he, I don't know.
Sorry, Andre, can you repeat, please?
Yes. So in the context of the previous conversations and the presentations showed today by the speakers, which aspects or what kind of ideas presented there do you think that could be already taken up and included in the CBA framework? So not only the discussion that we had now only about the definition, but some specific points either by thinking of the measures or maybe taking a structure that would help to address, identify, and define different adaptation and resilience measures. So what do you think would be relevant for your work to further proceed, and that could also define our next steps? So what to do with this work stream? And yeah, Lea?
Yeah, so exactly considering the next steps and the collaboration between, well, the CBA drafting team or the TSOs and maybe the consortium of Destination Earth that we mentioned before. I wonder how much knowledge could be shared already on looking more at the resilience assessment of the entire system, which if you look at with a probabilistic eye, it can be a very complex modelization to solve. And I wonder, so Terna, for instance, managed to do it for their national system. Europe is much bigger than that, but I guess Terna already managed to kind of minimize or like make the system simpler to be able to solve this modelization. So that could be an expected problem that ENTSO-E will find when trying to run probabilistic resilience assessment method in their system. And maybe their Terna or the TSOs or instances that have done this exercise before could be of a good help.
Thank you.
So I would agree on that. That's a good way, a good example already that we have seen from another TSO here. In principle, I would say also the information that we got from Acer is, which is also going into this direction already, is something that we can imagine to think forward. In general, I need to mention again that anything that comes in the CBA framework and the implementation needs to be discussed also in the application in the TYNDP process itself. So therefore, it need to be applicable in principle. But this is something that, of course, we need to improve something, because there's the need and the requirement for adding some specific information on the resilience and climate adaptation. Although climate adaptation, we already have something. But the climate resilience is something that we need to improve, and there we need to maybe also improve, or we need to consider this as well in the doing in the TYNDP itself, because from drafting team CBA side and from the drafting of the CBA methodology itself, it's always more easy to implement new methodologies, because we don't need to think about how they will be applied. But in the end, it needs to be applied in the TYNDP, and therefore we already need to think about this in the very first stage. But yeah, as said, we need to discuss about this, and the first step could be also to getting now information, more detailed information about how these examples have been applied, and maybe also thinking about this methodology proposed by Acer. Yeah, basically, I don't know if from the other ENTSO-E colleagues, is there any addition to that, or if not?
No one seems to complement that, but I see comment in the chat from Videt to follow up and strengthen the connection between TSOs and ENTSO-E and climate modeling, which is I think a good point, and maybe
and share best practices as well, no, in terms of modeling and future analysis. I don't know how much is already done between TSOs.
Yeah, so maybe this is a good point also to.
Sorry, I don't know if this is something that it's ENTSO-E organized, but I think it will be extremely valuable if ENTSO-E is like the central platform organizing, so the TSO can come together, they can share best practices in terms of future modeling. For example, if some TSO are much ahead of the game, like Terna is already doing some future analysis with climate impact, maybe also the other TSO could learn a lot. So perhaps this is also something that ENTSO-E could facilitate as a central organizer or platform, let's say.
Yeah, this is a good point, which I also have among my notes. But to follow up on the comment that Videt mentioned about, I'm going to share my screen. So yes, so it's here. Also, one of the projects that was mentioned is Destination Earth, that tries to that aims at integrating climate data into and trying to analyze different climate change impacts on different sectors. And also from RGI side, together with the German Aerospace Center and Aarhus University, we are involved in the use case dedicated to energy systems. In November, there will be an event, the user exchange meeting in Bonn, that many of practitioners and people involved in these projects are going to meet to discuss the progress of the project. And registration is going to be closed soon. And in the end of January, February, beginning of February, we are also organizing a workshop in Berlin, to which we will be happy to share the information with you, the invitations. And Lea, you might want to say more about the workshop.
Sure. We have, so to come back to the first event, so it's a public event that's going to touch upon many of the sectors that is analyzed in this big European program. But there will be sessions specified on the energy system, and it's public event open to any, what we call user, in this case is users climate data, and everyone in this room could be user of climate data in the energy system, so you're welcome to join. And in case of the most smaller workshops that we organize in Berlin, so the point will be to it's kind of will be part of the performance assessment of the model that the DLR and Aarhus University is working on, and this model focuses on helping energy system modelers, including TSOs, and actually focusing on TSOs to include climate data of, let's say, the new generation into their model, focusing on planning, parentheses. Yeah, you can get in touch with me and I will share information anyway.
Thanks a lot. And I will stop presenting here. And any other points and ideas? What I also noted down about this best practice exchange, I think that this will require as a follow-up some discussion and the kind of scoping, what kind of practices to share. But I think it's a good idea also to take that up. And something what Catherine mentioned in one of their points is to start discussing with DSOs because maybe they have some interesting experiences to and ideas to bring into the discussion.
I think I read about this also in one of the latest Acer report, right? There was this report about energy security of supply that was released this year. There was a big recommendation about more coordination between TSO facilitated by ENTSO-E. So
well, we mentioned this. I don't know which report.
Yeah,
Yes. Any other points? Any other ideas? I don't see any. I think that also we will need to go through all the notes and to see what is there and take some time to digest it. But I think that also what we would like to maintain is to keep this group of people that met today in the loop and inform each other about the updates and the activities that we are doing. And either in relation to specifically CBA methodology or more broadly on climate adaptation and resilience, because I think that was that the collection of people in this room and also online, bringing many different perspectives and aspects of this knowledge is very beneficial to all of us to learn from each other and improve the work that we're doing. So we will be happy to keep you in the loop. We will discuss also from RGI side with ENTSO-E how to proceed. But I think it would be good to stay in touch and connected, because what we also observed that there might be also another collaboration outside of the scope of this work stream, which kind of makes us happy. And yes, and maybe I think this could be kind of conclusion, because we mentioned about the next steps and also the importance of this collaboration. So as the next steps, we are also going to prepare the summary report of this workshop to present, to summarize key takeaways and share with the participants. We are going to discuss whether we can share the presentation so that each of the speaker would agree on that, on sharing the presentation, and of course your contact data, so that we can easily connect with you. And of course, that's the ending slide from RGI side to stay in touch. But also, I guess on the ENTSO-E side, we should have an open communication channel in that matter. So I think it's a right moment to finish, unless there are any last minute comments, which I don't see. So I would like to say many thanks to all the participants who joined the workshop, be it here in person or or online, and being flexible and to changing conditions, changing format, and changing agenda. But I think that the most important point is that we had this very insightful conversation, and we could start from that also to improve the CBA guidelines, and then let's say the new knowledge on climate adaptation and resilience. So many thanks to all the participants. Many thanks to Frank, Nils, and Rodrigo from ENTSO-E, and to Damiano and Lea for helping in organizing this event. And as mentioned, let's stay in touch, and we will definitely follow up. So thank you very much, and thank you to all the participants online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.